Good morning, everyone, board members and public. I'd like to welcome you all to the California State Board of Optometry public meeting. I want to ask all of you to please turn your cell phones to silent. You may notice board members accessing their laptops, phones, or other devices during the meeting. They are using the devices solely to access board meeting materials that are in the electronic format. We have a designated time on the agenda for public comment and ask for public comment on each agenda item. I ask that you be respectful of the need to conduct the board's business. This meeting is available via teleconference. However, the board is webcasting the meeting as a courtesy to the public as well, and the meeting will continue even if the webcast fails, pursuant to the notice given in the agenda. Individuals listening to the meeting will have an opportunity to provide public comment and will be assigned by the moderator who will be facilitating the teleconferencing process. For those members of the public participating via teleconference, please wait until the moderator has introduced you before making your comments. Each person will be limited to 2 minutes per agenda item. The board welcomes public comment on any item on the agenda, and it is the board's intent to ask for public comment prior to the board making any action on any agenda item. If for some reason I forget to ask for public comment on the agenda item and you wish to speak on that item, please raise your hand and you will be recognized. Today, the meeting will be run according to the Open Meetings Act as required by law. We plan to end today by 4 p.m. I would now like to introduce you to our Executive Officer, Gregory Pruden.
Good morning, everybody.
And as we do at each meeting, before we do roll call, I'd like to state our mission, vision, and values. The mission of the California State Board of Optometry is to protect the health and safety of California consumers through licensing, registration, education, and the regulation of optometry and opticianry. Our vision is to have the highest quality optometric and optical care for all people of California. Our values are consumer protection, integrity, transparency, professionalism, excellence, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Now I would like to call the meeting to order and ask Secretary Bragg to please call the roll.
Member Clemens,
Present.
Member Dawson,
Present.
Member Sue,
Present.
Member Kleppa,
Present.
Dr. Pruitt, Dr. Wong,
Present.
Dr. Bragg present, Vice President Linden,
Present.
President Garcia.
Present. Okay, thank you. A quorum is present. Let's move on to agenda item number 2, public comments on items not on the agenda. The board welcomes public comment on any item not on the agenda. The board will extend 2 minutes to each speaker to speak on any topic that is not already before the board for discussion today. Before we move to any public comment Before we move on to any public comment from members in the public, in the audience, or online, I wanted to make sure that members saw in their packets. Let's see. Okay, so we can go to public comment for anyone in the audience.
Great. This is the moderator. I just want to confirm if there's any public in the room first that wants to make public comment. All right, sounds like there isn't. So we'll move over to WebEx. For members of the public on WebEx, if you would like to make a public comment for items not on the agenda, you can click the raise hand icon. And for audio only participants, you can raise your hand by pressing *3 on your device. All right, and this is the moderator. Appears there are no requests for public comment at this time.
Thank you, moderator. You Pruden? Do you expect any public comments? No, okay. So we'll move on to item 3, discussion and possible action. So members, we have meeting minutes from 2 meetings. This is a little bit different. As you recall, we did have a separate meeting on the 13th. So we will have 2 discussions on this, and we'll approve them separately. First, are there any additions or corrections to the 2/13/2025 minutes from the members? Seeing none, we have a motion to approve these minutes as submitted. We have a motion. We have a second.
Second. I'll second it.
For the record, somebody state who's making the motion and then let's second it for formal purpose. Member Clemens makes the motion to approve.
Dr.
Was there a
Walsh, I'll second it.
First and second. Is there any public comment on the minutes from February 13th? You can open it up for anyone in the audience.
This is the moderator, and for members of the public on WebEx, if you would like to make a comment on this item, you can click the raise hand icon. And if you're an audio only participant, you can raise your hand by pressing *3 on your device. All right, this is the moderator. Appears there are no requests for public comment at this time.
Thank you very much. Secretary Bragg, if we can have a roll call vote.
Member Clemens,
Aye.
Member Dawson,
Aye.
Member Sue,
Aye.
Member Kleppa,
Aye.
Dr. Wong,
Aye.
Dr. Bragg, aye. Vice President Linden? Aye. President Garcia?
I vote aye.
Motion passes.
Motion passes. And we'll move on to the second set. Are there any additions or corrections to the February 14th, 2025 minutes from the members? May I have a motion to approve these minutes as submitted?
This is Member Wong. I will make the motion to approve.
And a second?
I will second.
Is there any public comment for those in the audience or online?
This is the moderator. For members of the public on WebEx, if you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the raise hand icon, or if you're an audio only participant, you can press *3 on your device. All right, and it appears there are no requests for public comment at this time.
Thank you, moderator. Secretary Bragg, if we can perform a roll call vote, please.
Member Clemens,
Aye.
Member Dawson,
Aye.
Member Sue,
Aye.
Member Kleppa,
Aye.
Dr. Wong,
Aye.
Dr. Bragg, aye. Vice President Linden? Aye. President Garcia?
I vote aye. The motion passes. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 4, discussion of possible action on Department of Consumer Affairs update. Executive Office members today, and we have Ms. Leslie Barmby from the Department of Consumer Affairs Executive Office with us for a DCA update.
Good morning, everyone. I am Leslie Barmby from the California Department of Consumer Affairs. Thank you for the opportunity to join you today. In January, Governor Newsom released his proposed 2025-26 state budget, which included a proposal to split our current business, consumer services, and housing agency into 2 agencies. The California Housing and Homelessness Agency and the Business and Consumer Services Agency. The proposed California Housing and Homelessness Agency will oversee housing and homelessness solutions and safeguard civil rights. The new Business and Consumer Services Agency will be responsible for consumer affairs, licensing, and enforcement. The Department of Consumer Affairs would be among the 8 entities in this new agency. As part of the process in state government, on April 4th, 2025, the governor's reorganization plan was delivered to the nonpartisan Little Hoover Commission for review. The submission of the plan to the commission began an approximate 90-day formal process. In the coming weeks, the commission will conduct public hearings for interested parties to provide input on the proposed reorganization. The dates for these hearings will be announced soon. After the hearings, and within 30 days of the plan being submitted to the commission will write a report that it will submit to the governor and the legislature. The commission's report will offer a recommendation to the governor and the legislature as to whether it believes the reorganization plan should go into effect. The Commission sometimes offers recommendations for how the plan could be strengthened, either through administrative actions or subsequent legislation. The legislature will then have 60 days to review and consider the reorganization plan. The governor's plan becomes effective on the 61st day after it has been given to the legislature, unless either the Senate or the Assembly adopts by majority vote a resolution to reject the plan. If approved, the Business and Consumer Services Agency will be created in July 2025 with 1 year of transition and will become operative on July 1st, 2026. In addition to several virtual briefings hosted by Secretary Moss, there is detailed information available on the reorganization plan website at https://bcsh.ca.gov/about/reorganization. We believe this is an extraordinary opportunity for DCA to better align with other consumer protection entities. With a dedicated consumer protection focused secretary with the governor's cabinet, this is an exciting opportunity that will only strengthen our mission, momentum, and delivery of services to California. DCA will continue to keep the board and bureau leadership updated on the progress of the governor's reorganization plan. Next, on March 3rd, 2025, Governor Newsom issued an executive order requiring all state agencies and departments to update their hybrid telework policies for employees and increase from 2 to 4 days in office per week beginning on July 1st, 2025. On March 13th, 2025, the California Department of Human Resources issued guidance on the implementation of the executive order. The guidance provides defined parameters for which agencies and departments can make case-by-case exceptions to the 4-day in-office minimum requirement. DCA has been working closely with a few programs on identifying additional space needed for this transition. DCA has been working hard responding to questions and will continue to keep leadership updated on any additional direction received from CalHR. Thank you again for the opportunity to be here today, and I am happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Are
Thank
there
you.
any questions from the board members? Any questions from the audience? Any questions from anyone online through WebEx?
This is the moderator for members of the public on WebEx. If you would like to make a public comment on this item, please click the raise hand icon. And if you're an audio only participant, you can raise your hand by pressing *3 on your device. All right, and it appears there are no requests for public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Barnby. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now we'll move on to Budget Office Fund Condition. Members with us virtually from the Budget Office are Suzanne Balkus, Budget Manager, and Julian Lux, Budget Analyst. Mr. Lux will present the board's revenues, expenditures, and fund conditions for us today.
Thank you and good morning. My name is Julian Lux, and I am a budget analyst with the DCA Budget Office. I'm joined by my budget manager, Suzanne Balkus. I first would like to thank the board and the executive staff for allowing me a few minutes today to present on agenda item 4BI, the board's expenditures and projections and fund condition statement. First, I'm going to start with the board's expenditures, attachment 4BI, page 1 of your materials. These projections are based on actual data through fiscal month 8. This report includes 2023-24 actual expenditures in green, as well as 2024-2025 budgeted and projected expenditures in blue and orange. As we move to the end of the document, you will see that the board had a beginning base budget of $3.806 million and is projected to spend a little over $2.8 million, creating a reversion to the board's fund of approximately $937,000, which is a reversion percentage of 24.61%. The next document I will be going over is the board's revenue projections, attachment 4BI, page 2 of your materials. This report includes receipts collected through February and projected revenue till the end of the year. I will go further into the projection as we transition to the next slide. The next document is attachment 4BI, page 3 of your materials. This is the board's fund condition statement. As a reminder, we read this document from top to bottom and left to right. The left column is the board's prior year 2023-24 actuals. For the current year, 24-25, the board's projected revenues projects revenues of $3.349 million, with $401,000 projected from initial license fees, $2.688 million from renewal fees, and $260,000 from the issuance of citations, fines, delinquent fees, and other revenues. The board's 2024-25 expenditures are based on the governor's budget with FM8 projections at $3.225 million between authorized expenditures and direct draws to the fund, leaving the board with a fund balance of approximately $3.055 million, or an 8.5 month in reserve. The budget office will continue to monitor the board's revenue and expenditures and report back to the board with monthly expenditure projection as we continue to close fiscal month in the current fiscal year. A few things to note of the board's fund condition. The fund condition is just a snapshot in time. One of the main factors driving expenditures increases in future years is a result of personal service adjustments. These includes general salary increases, as well as employee compensation and retirement rate adjustments. The budget office includes a conservative ongoing 3% increase to expenditures on the fund condition statements to account for these ongoing incremental adjustments. You will also notice revenue is projected static in the out years. Lastly, I would like to note that to the board that any future legislations or unanticipated events could result in the board's need for additional resources, which will create cost pressure on the fund. The last document we have is attachment 4BI, page 4 of your materials. This is a mock fund condition statement for the board's references. The fund condition statement shows the Department of Consumer Affairs future expenditures with a scenario based on the government's budget with FM8 projections. This scenario includes a 5% growth factor for by year and ongoing. This highlights that if the expenditures remain similar to the last 2 fiscal years, then this estimate will reflect how the board month-in reserve will compare to the previous fund condition statements, which project the board spending to its full appropriation. This allows the board a visual to showcase that if the board continues to spend relatively similar, the board's month-in reserve will substantially increase when compared to the standard fund condition statement that it was displayed. The budget office will continue to monitor the board's fund condition and statement and keep the line of communication with the board's executive staff open for any future needs or expectation. Again, thank you for allowing me the time and the opportunity to present at today's meeting, and we'll be happy to answer any question that you may have.
Are there any comments from the board? Bruden?
I just want to say thank you, Julian. That was a very well done presentation. And just for the board's awareness, Julian is our new assigned budget analyst. He's been with us just for a few months now. Very, very good job, Julian. So thank you for doing that. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Are there any comments from the public in the audience? Are there any comments from those online? or
This is the
WebEx?
This is the moderator for members of the public on WebEx. If you would like to make a public comment on this item, please click the raise hand icon, or if you're an audio only participant, you can raise your hand by pressing *3 on your device. All right, and it appears there are no requests for public comment at this time.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to item number 5, discussion and possible action on board president's report. I just have a few things to report. First, in your memo for this item, you'll see that there was some efforts to help licensees track their CE and assist staff in performing audits. Continuing education courses that are accredited by the Council on Optometric Practitioner Education, otherwise known as COPE, utilize QR codes, and licensees can directly scan their certificates and obtain credit in OE Tracker. OE Tracker is a system that many optometrists throughout the country use. Licensees often take CE from other approved providers, but these providers may not have QR codes currently to access the OE Tracker. So the practitioner has to physically submit COPE courses or their CE courses to become part of their OE Tracker record. Working with Dr. Kawaguchi, optometrist, former board member and current board liaison to the Association of Regulatory Boards of Optometry, ARBO, we have conveyed to the OE Tracker Committee of the ARBO that the board is interested in whether non-COPE CE courses could also receive a QR code and be utilized in the same way. This functionality would assist licensees who use OE Tracker and take CE from a variety of sources to reduce paper, increase tracking and accuracy of CE, and potentially assist the licensee establish compliance during any random CE audits performed by our board. Any questions on that item? Yes.
Can I just make a comment?
Of course, yes.
All right, so I'm currently co-chair of the OE Tracker Committee, and we had an in-person meeting in Dallas in February, and we recognized the importance of having QR codes for non-COPE courses. So that's really high on the list of things that we want to accomplish, and so it's definitely being worked on.
Thank you, Dr. Wong. Second item, congratulations are in order for EO Pruden for being awarded the Dr. Ken Lawenda Scholarship to attend the annual ARBO meeting in Minneapolis in July. This is the second time that EO Pruden has applied and been selected for this scholarship, so congratulations. As a board, it is important that we have and maintain a relationship with ARBO as a state with the most ODs and most optometry colleges in the nation. It's always good to have a seat at the table and have direct input and communications with ARBO on all matters that affect California optometry. So, would you like to say anything about that?
Yeah, I just appreciate those kind words. President Garcia was gracious in, I think, making the submission and the nomination on my behalf. So thank you for that. Was very fortunate to attend that conference last year, and I reported on that conference to the board when I got back, and I'll do the same for this year's conference. As you said, being able to establish relationships with your colleague executive directors and executive officers from other states, I think is vitally important to the work that we're doing here. A lot of other states are facing similar issues and topics that we talk about, and being able to learn from their efforts can only serve us well in what we're doing here. So looking forward to going to Minnesota, and I will be reporting back on that meeting at our July board meeting.
Thank you, EO Pruden. We look forward to that. Are there any comments from members of the board on my report? No. Any comments from anyone in the audience? No. Can we open it up for any comments from those online on WebEx?
This is the moderator for members of the public on WebEx. If you would like to make a public comment, you can click the raise hand icon, or if you're an audio only participant, you can raise your hand by pressing *3 on your device. All right, and it appears there are no requests for public comment at this time.
Thank you, moderator. Okay, let's move on to agenda item number 6, which is update, discussion, and possible action on board responses to Optometry Sunset Review Committee background paper. I'll hand this over to Mr. Pruden.
Thank you, President Garcia and members. So as Member Garcia just stated, President Garcia just stated, this is a substantive item to consider and discuss and hopefully approve our responses to the Sunset Committee's background paper. On March 4th, 2025, Board President Garcia and myself participated in the joint Sunset Review hearing conducted by the Assembly Business Professions Committee and the Senate Business Professions and Economic Development Committee. These committees prepared a background paper for the hearing, which identified 19 substantive, 20 overall issues, and staff has prepared draft responses to all of those identified issues. I am going to walk us through each one of the responses. And so we're going to start with issue number 1, which is on page 16 within the item. Hopefully that is helpful to us locating it. Issue number 1 has to do with the dispensing optician committee. The DOC has not met for a number of years. Is this committee still necessary? The staff recommendation, meaning the committee recommendation, is the board should advise the committees as to the necessity of continuing the DOC committee as a statutorily mandated committee. And if so, what is the board doing to ensure member appointments are a priority? We agendized at our February meeting a topic to discuss the future of the DOC. And coming out of that item, what we established was a 2-member work group. And so the draft response for this issue points to that effort that we began to engage on in February. And the draft response indicates that that work group will be engaging in that work and making recommendations. So I want to walk through each one of these issues. In front of you, you have a draft response. What we would like is to have the board engage on each one of these draft responses. If there are changes or edits or questions that you have as we work through each one of these answers, now would be the time to do that. And so within issue number 1 in that draft response, I'd like to open it up to the members and see if there's any feedback or comments with that item. If there are none, we can move right along to number 2.
I was just going to say, it appears that the response basically meets the concern, right? We have now a committee that's going to be dealing with this very issue, so hopefully we've resolved that issue.
Yeah.
Right?
I
So
think that's fair.
just want to be sure I understood correctly. Sounds good.
I think you're on the right track. Issue number 2 has to do with email addresses and whether licensees and applicants should be required to provide the board with an email address. And as a reminder, this board has said in its sunset report that we want to see this as a requirement for our applicants and our licensees. And so we restate we ask for that to happen. As an update for the board, there is a bill, and we will talk about this later on in the agenda, that does propose to give our board and all of the rest of the boards within the department this authority to require email addresses from applicants and licensees. Again, we believe that it is important that that email address remain confidential. It should exist as a tool for us to communicate with applicants and licensees to help facilitate the application and licensure process. We also foresee potential benefits in terms of a reduction in paper and an increase in processing times and just an increase in overall communication between the board and applicants and licensees. So the draft response indicates again our request that this authority be given to the board. Are there any comments on the proposed response for issue number 2?
I promise I won't comment on all of them, but I agree with this response as well, especially the confidentiality. We don't want to have these taken advantage of by marketers or other people who would misuse the emails. Should just be for board use, official communication, that type of thing. So I agree wholeheartedly with that recommendation.
Thank you, Member Kleppa. Okay, issue number 3 has to do with mobile optometric offices and quarterly reporting requirements and whether those reporting requirements should be streamlined. The staff recommendation, the committee recommendation is that the board should explain if there are any places where the reporting requirements can be streamlined to ensure that we are receiving information that is necessary. And we should advise if we believe the prescription requirements should be consistent with existing law. So as stated in the draft response here, and this was something that I also indicated in my testimony on March 4th, we do believe that there are areas where we can streamline this reporting requirement. Right now, it is a quarterly reporting requirement. Legislation last year made a change for licensees in their first renewal period can actually submit the report on an annual basis. They have the option of submitting it quarterly or annually. We think it would make more sense to make that reporting requirement annually for everybody and not be a quarterly report requirement. There are also a few elements that are required to be reported in that quarterly report that we think perhaps don't need to be. One of those has to do with present requirement that a summary of all complaints received by the mobile optometric office provider be included in the report back to the board. We don't think that makes a lot of sense because pursuant to existing law, a consumer notice already has to be given to patients, which instructs them on how to file a complaint against a provider, which would be with our board. So we want consumers sending that information directly to us. We don't want to necessarily find out about it months later in a quarterly report. So we think we can remove that because consumers are still protected with the notice requirement. So those are two important changes there. The third item within this issue had to do with prescription requirements, and there's existing language that requires existing law already requires copies of prescriptions to be given to patients, but the MOO statute also requires a copy of the prescription to be provided upon the request of a caregiver or a parent. I think the committees are suggesting that maybe there's some duplicity in the prescription requirements there. I think we believe, however, that that's an important requirement that should stay because oftentimes the patients of mobile optometric offices are students or young people, and we want their parents and guardians and caregivers to know that they can also request a copy of that prescription. So we think that that should maintain or should stay in the law. So that's what the draft response on this issue responds to. Happy to take any comments or feedback from the board on that. Okay, seeing no comments on that, I will move on. The next two issues have to do with board budget. The topic is board budget issues. So issue number 4 is projected fund deficit. Will the board seek a fee increase? The board should advise the committees on its current budget projections and whether it believes a fee increase will be necessary. One of the main reasons why we've been including that mock fund condition, this meeting and the last meeting, is to try to display more realistic numbers, both to the board, but also members of the public and stakeholders, to show that we don't believe that our fund condition is heading to a place that requires a fee increase put on licensees right now. That being said, our statute has capped fees for optometry since 2009 and has capped fees for opticianry since 2016. Those fees have not been statutorily increased since those dates, since those years. It may make sense to increase the ceiling to a higher number. Doing that would give the board the ability to pursue a fee increase down the road via regulation when the economic fund conditions warranted doing such an action. So what we mentioned in this draft response is the idea of taking the present caps and increasing them to a higher number. That would not result in a fee increase being implemented on licensees. I think it's important to state that. It simply just increases again in statute. The board would have to implement any new fees via regulation. We would engage in the same regulatory process that we did in 2024 when we issued a regulation which increased fees up to the present caps. So the idea here is that we think it may make sense, we think it does make sense, to increase the ceiling that exists in statute to give the board regulatory authority down the road when it may need it. But again, underscoring that right now, as we just talked about in the last item, we don't see any need for new fees on licensees or applicants over the course of the next 4 years. I'm happy to take comments or questions from the members on this draft response.
I have a comment on this response. I agree with the way it's presented. I agree that there is an idea that we should not necessarily seek a fee increase until we have the justification for it, which is what's stated here. My only thought is we may consider a little more affirmative language asking to raise the ceiling. Because right here, what we're talking about here is it might be a good idea. I think a more affirmative statement, the board agrees that the ceiling should be raised for all of these reasons, might be a more useful way of presenting.
Okay.
That's my only concern. Otherwise, it looks good.
Okay. Just to be clear for you, Member Kluppa, and the board, what I hope to do is achieve board approval for all of these draft responses today. We owe these responses to the committee. They have to be provided to the committee. They generally want them around 30 days from the hearing. We're a little bit longer than 30 days from the hearing. So any changes or amendments or edits that we want to make, we have a little bit of time to make them for sure, but I don't anticipate this item coming back to a subsequent meeting. And we need to hopefully approve these responses today and submit them to the legislature. So if you want to suggest maybe changes, that might be something that the board want to engage on crafting that actual language here and now.
I would just consider adding a initial sentence, just straight up front and say, the board believes that raising the ceiling would be an appropriate action to take by the legislature, and then give the remainder of this as justification for that affirmative statement.
Okay.
Oh, this is Member Linden. I just want to make a comment that I agree with what the board response is. As we all know, we just had a regulatory fee increase, and you could see from the history that, we don't pursue statutory fee increases very often. It's been about, 15 years since the last one, and then 15 years prior to that. And so I don't think anyone on this board anticipates having to pursue, another increase or anything like that. But it seems like just to make sure that it's already there in place, if and when we need that in the future, it just seems like it is the responsible thing to do. So yeah, thank you.
This member Dawson, I have a question. After the draft response is submitted, to request the ceiling increase, that is another process, right?
I think the heart of your question is like, well, what would the new number be?
No,
No.
just it's a different process. Once this is submitted, that legislative body isn't the one that says, okay, yes, let's do the increase for the ceiling.
Yeah, ultimately, so if there's responses, if it's approved as it's written here, we would turn this in, and then that probably begin a negotiation with the legislature and stakeholders if they were willing to engage on this issue, right? Ultimately, the committees are going to decide about what goes into the bill. We don't decide what goes into it, the actual language. But we would, if this was approved as is, we would be wanting to work together with stakeholders in the committees to hopefully come up with a agreement or a recommendation about what the new ceiling could be. I'd be hopeful that we could achieve that, but we'll see.
I agree with the draft response. I think it's good.
You look like you want to.
Member Bragg, I want to agree with Mr. Kluppa about having it kind of more, we want to do this, not a kind of, it'd be great, but
Okay.
kind of a little more firm that we do have that flexibility down the road, not saying that we will use it, but kind of to stress the importance and instead of us being on our back foot
Sure.
a few years down the road.
Okay. Yep. It's good feedback. Thank you. Thank you, members.
Just going to say, members are welcome to also make a motion on the specific one if they want to include specific language.
Okay.
That might be an easy way just to hash it all out.
Okay. So I think Member Bragg and Member Kluppa have kind of taken a stab at that sentence. Try it again for me.
It was just something to the effect of the board would request that the legislature enact a higher fee ceiling such that a future fee increase, if needed, would be available to the board.
I'll take
That
that.
can probably be phrased better, but that was my thinking.
Yeah, we can work with that.
Member Club, I think that would be a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Are there any comments from anyone in the audience? Any comments from anyone on WebEx?
This is the moderator for members of the public on WebEx. If you would like to make a comment on this item, you can click the raise hand icon. Or if you're an audio only participant, you can raise your hand by pressing *3 on your device. All right, and it appears there are no requests for public comment at this time.
Thank you, moderator. Secretary Bragg, if we can have a roll call vote, please.
Member Clemens,
Aye.
Member Dawson,
Aye.
Member Sue,
Aye.
Member Kleppa,
Aye.
Dr. Wong,
Aye.
Dr. Bragg, aye. Vice President Linden,
Aye.
President Garcia.
I vote aye. Okay, motion passes. Moving on. Yo, Pruden?
Yep. Thank you, members. This is issue number 5. This is also again related to board budget issues. Mandatory reserve is the current statutorily prescribed fund reserve amount still feasible? The committees point out that our reserve limit in statute is 6 months. Many other programs within the Department of Consumer Affairs have a 24-month statutory reserve cap or limit. And so the topic or the question of the moment is whether we should have that increase from 6 to 24 to be more consistent. And I think we should. I think that makes sense. Again, this is a limit. Right now, if you look at our fund condition, we're technically in violation of the 6-month limit. We're a little bit higher than that, although our fund condition is trending downward. So I think this is more of a technical change than anything else to make us more consistent with our other sister boards and bureaus in the department. So happy to get feedback on this one from the members. I think it's pretty straightforward, though. All right. Seeing no comments on issue 5, we'll move on. Issue number 6, University of California funding. A portion of license fees is provided to the University of California. Is additional accountability necessary? Committee recommends that the board provide an update on the total amount provided to the University of California, and the legislature may wish to require an annual report on the expenditure of these funds to determine if the allocation of the licensing fees to the university should be continued. The background here is that under current law, $16 of every renewal is remitted to the University of California. In the draft response, we have tallied up on a fiscal year basis that information for the last 4 full fiscal years, and we've included information for this current fiscal year as well. And you can see what those amounts are over the total past 5 fiscal years. It's nearly $300,000. These amounts are not insignificant. They represent real monies that go out of our fund and go to the University of California. We have been in communication with the University of California to work with them and try to better understand how the funds are used and things of that nature. Appreciate those conversations. I think those are still ongoing. So we look forward to working with UC on that. We don't believe, however, that the board should have a statutory reporting requirement. In lieu of such a statutorily required report, the board could commit to reporting this information at board meetings or via the DCA annual report. There's a variety of other existing reports that we are part of or that we provide information to. It would probably make more sense if the legislature wants to see that information reported to include it there and not place a new reporting requirement on the board. But that is issue number 6 related to the UC funding and those the $16 of license fees that is provided to the university. Any questions or comments from the members?
Question and comment. I wasn't aware of this transfer. Is this something that is common for licensing boards to do, to transfer part of what they receive from their licensees to a third party?
I can't speak to the other health boards. I don't think we have anything else like this for our board. But I'm not familiar with other boards and any remittances that they may have.
Okay,
Sorry.
you've been dealing with the legislative committees that are relevant to this board far more than I. Is it your understanding that they're looking to allow us to claw back some of this money, or they're just talking about better reporting how much is going out and what it's being used for, but letting it go out as currently required? Do you know?
I don't know. I think they are interested in just understanding what the purpose of it is and what it's used for. And that's about all I know at the moment.
Would it be useful for us to put in some language to gain clarification from the appropriate committee as to whether some of these funds might be clawed back from the board for its own use, since we currently have open positions that we are not funding due to insufficient funds?
The board can certainly decide to amend the draft response, and we could say that. I would suggest, I've had one conversation with the new dean who just recently started at the University of California, and I think I would like to have more conversations with her. In fact, I'm going to be meeting with her, I hope next week when I am visiting the university to give a presentation. I think it may be premature at this point to say something too strong about, clawback or things along those lines. Might be more appropriate at this time to just engage in conversation, learn more about how it's used, and see where that information takes us.
All right. Well, my thought might be that we could include some language talking about a possible reduction depending on the outcome of those conversations. We don't have to claw back prior amounts sent, but we might consider reducing total outlay because, as indicated, we'd like to increase the monies that we have available for our purposes, and it's going to a third party, and I'm not seeing exactly what it's used for. So I think some language talking about an ability to revisit this issue once more information comes in and allow the legislature to better determine the amount to be sent out versus kept, I think is reasonable to add.
That would be a motion that you could make, and
Okay. I'll be happy to make that. So it would be in addition to the language, and it would just something to the effect of the board would essentially inquire as to whether the legislative purpose here is truly being served by this outlay and whether some of these funds a lesser amount of these funds may be sent out such that more can be retained by the board for its own use. Something to that effect. Because since we don't know, I don't see how it's being used and we could use the money ourselves for our own purposes. I think this is a conversation we could start with that addition to this language.
Member Kaba, could I help maybe with the motion clarification?
please
Give me
do.
1 second just to think through this.
bless you.
We should note in the record, all unanimous on the bless you.
Could we maybe move on to the next one? Just give me a second to think through language. You guys okay with that? We can come circle back.
Yeah, we can come back.
This is Member Dawson. Just a question. Do we know if the other optometry boards across the country have something similar that helps the universities, those states that have schools that offer optometry?
I'm not aware. Yeah, we can move on to issue 7. We'll come back to issue 6. Issue 7 is pro rata. Is the board receiving appropriate services for the amount it pays in pro rata? Pro rata is the cost or the charge that the board pays for administrative services it receives from the Department of Consumer Affairs. So these are things like our regulatory and legal counsel, our budget analyst, human resources, IT, things of that nature are not housed within the board. We pay the Department of Consumer Affairs for those centralized administrative services. And so the board wants to know whether we believe that we're receiving value for those services and for the amount that we pay. The draft response indicates, as you see in your packet, that we believe that we do. If we had to have all of those services conducted by employees within our board, it would significantly raise the amount of expenditures and costs that we incur. And so we believe that the pro rata contributions are vitally important to the success that we do, and don't have any issues or changes that we would recommend. Are there any questions or comments from the members on this issue number 7 having to do with pro rata? Okay. We'll move on to issue number 8. These are the next few issues have to do with some licensing topics. This is optometric assistants and unregistered individuals. An optometric assistant is an unregistered individual, just for clarity purposes. The question or the issue from the legislature is, is there any likelihood of consumer harm if the public receives services from individuals who are not regulated? And the committees ask whether or not the board has received consumer complaints about unlicensed or unregistered individuals. And they also ask the board to provide feedback, the committees with feedback in response to a scope of practice study that was done by the board a few years ago. In the draft response, we provide information regarding the unlicensed activity complaints that we do receive, as we've talked about at the board at several of our recent meetings. We actively look for unlicensed activity, and we've discussed how we do that. We don't, however, break the complaints down in terms of unlicensed activity, business entity versus unlicensed activity, individual. We've included the data in terms of how many of those unlicensed cases we've received over the past 4 years. Regarding the Office of Professional Examination Services scope of practice study, this was a study that the board discussed at its August 2023 board meeting. We had a presentation from DCA regarding the occupational analysis and scope of practice study. And as was indicated at that time, and we reiterate here, I think an important limitation to that study and survey was a very low response rate and sample size, and can be difficult to extrapolate, opinions and formulate policy off of such a small sample size. The study, however, did make a few recommendations, which the board did not take any action on. The board did not take any action on the study recommendations at that August meeting, and hasn't taken any action since then. The board, as we say in our draft response here, I think we should be open to discussing the topic. The unlicensed optometric assistant statute 2544 was only just recently amended to increase the tasks that those unlicensed individuals can do, and that effort came about as a result of compromise from several stakeholders. But a reconstituted, DOC might be appropriate to study these sorts of issues. As we've talked about, we don't have a DOC constituted, and we have the 2-member work group that's going to be engaging on that topic and looking to make recommendations about what that committee should look like. But it would entirely be appropriate for such a committee like the DOC to consider the OPES study and whether any additional policies or recommendations should be made regarding optometric assistance. So that's our response for this issue. Again, it's kind of a 2-part issue having to do with unlicensed activity, but also the scope and activities that optometric assistants can do. Happy to take questions, comments, feedback from the members on this issue and this topic. Member Clemens.
This unresolved issue, in my mind, sat apart from many of the other ones, and I'm curious about its genesis. Two things. One, it seems different than the more operational questions that most of the other unresolved issues seem to be focusing upon. And secondly, it does strike me that I think I speak for probably the entire board when I want to say thank you to our director and to our president for the staggering amount of work that is required, and our former president, who is down at the end of the dais, for the staggering amount of work that the Sunshine Review process takes, and your willingness to go defend our organization in front of the assembly. But my primary question is, how did this one make the list? Was there a request for it from, I'm just curious of its origin.
Yeah, I don't know the full answer there, but I would surmise again. I think the statute 2544, the Business and Professions Code, which outlines what an unlicensed optometric assistant can do, has changed over time and has increased the amount of activities that these individuals can do. And the more recent policy change both increased their activities, but then also put a 45-hour training requirement in place. I think the legislature is generally interested in how this is kind of all working and how it's all, how's it all going out there. Regarding that 45-hour training component, that's not something that we have really seen. We haven't really seen an example of, what does that 45-hour training component look like? The statute, for example, just says it's 45 hours of documented training sufficient to the licensee, which would be the ophthalmologist or the optometrist. So I think the legislature is generally interested in kind of how it's going. And then on the study aspect of it, I think for their perspective, it's like, well, you did a study and then you didn't act on it. So what's going on there? Which is true, but the board did receive the presentation and did have that opportunity. It's the board's purview to make that action or not. So I think just a general curiosity would be my guess as to why this one's on here.
Let me narrow it a tiny bit. And you may not know the answer to this, but are the questions, the unresolved question, the list of unresolved questions, do they come attached to a particular member of the assembly, or are they all aggregated in whole?
So the two committees, the Assembly and the Senate Committee, staff puts this together, as I'm sure you know. But this very well could have come from one of the members of either the Assembly or the Senate Committee. Could have came from the chair. It didn't come from us. Any other questions or comments on this issue 8? Okay.
Should we move back?
We could, if there's no other comments or questions on issue 8, we can move back to issue, I believe it was issue 6.
Okay, yes. With council's assistance, I think we came up with some better language. It would have been, I move to include language asking the legislature to review the current amount of the appropriation and consider whether a reduction would be appropriate.
Okay.
So we have a motion from Member Kleppa. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
First and a second. Any comments from the audience? Any comments from anyone on WebEx?
This is the moderator for members of the public on WebEx. If you would like to make a public comment on this item, please click the raise hand icon, or if you're an audio only participant, you can raise your hand by pressing *3 on your device. All right, and it looks like we do have a request from Ruby Garcia. Ruby, you will be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, thanks. I liked what was going on. Just on the cap of the licensing, I think that's great. Wanted just to point out that I need some clarification. It seems like the SLDs and CLDs had a fee increase. And I'm wondering if is there a cap to that? Because we had 2 fee increases, I believe, since 2017. That's all my comment.
Council, is it appropriate for me to provide information responding to that?
Ms. Garcia, do you mind? So right now we're talking about the motion for issue 6, right? Regarding the the appropriation to the University of California. Do you mind if you raise that comment again at the end? Would that be good with you?
This is the moderator. Let me request to unmute Ms. Garcia again.
Yes, that would be fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just to be clear, do you have any comments on the current motion?
Ms. Garcia, if you do have a comment on the motion, if you could raise your hand again. If not, then we will move on. All right, it appears there are no further requests for public comment.
Okay.
We have a motion. We have a second from
Second.
Member Bragg.
We get a roll call vote.
Member Clemens,
Aye.
Member Dawson,
Aye.
Member Sue,
Aye.
Member Kleppa,
Aye.
Dr. Wong,
Aye.
Dr. Bragg, aye. Vice President Linden,
Aye.
President Garcia.
I vote aye.
Okay.
Motion passes. Let's move on.
Awesome. I think we had finished 8 and we were moving to 9. Issue number 9 is fictitious name permits. Are there any issues with the current process for issuing a fictitious name permit? Just as a reminder for the board, a fictitious name permit is required when an optometrist is advertising their optometric services fictitiously with a name that's not their real name. The staff recommendation, committee recommendation is the board should advise the committees about any concerns with the current permit program, and if there are circumstances where the board is unable to issue a permit to an applicant. There are a couple of things I think that the board should consider and the legislature should consider within this issue. One is that the FNP, the fictitious name permit program, it's the only license type that we issue that expires annually. And it expires always on January 31st. I think this causes some confusion sometimes for those licensees that also hold this permit because it's not expiring it's not coterminous with their optometrist license expiration unless they happen to be expiring in the month of January. And again, it's annually, whereas the optometrist licensure is every 2 years. So there may be an opportunity to align that permit cycle with the license cycle. That has nothing to do, though, however, with whether we have any challenges with issuing a permit to an applicant. And we have not been able to issue any permits to anybody that has applied. So that has not happened. And we state that in the response. However, there may be some emerging examples, telehealth being one. The fictitious name permit statute talks about a place or an establishment, which indicates a physical location. We have had a few inquiries of individuals who are telehealth only optometrists who advertise fictitiously, and there's a question about whether they need a permit because, again, the statute says place or establishment. The real heart of the FNP statute has to do, again, with advertising, right? And advertising your services with a fictitious name. And so in those situations where we've had a telehealth OD that doesn't have a physical storefront, they're working out of their home, we have still been able to issue them a permit. We've just used their address of record in order to do that. But again, the statute says place or establishment. There may be opportunity to amend that to account for these other examples. So that is what we have for this draft response. I'm happy to take questions or comments from the members. Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item 10. Item 10 actually was one of our original issues in our sunset report, having to do with a diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, CE, encouragement, not a requirement, but an encouragement. We just reaffirm our support for that proposal, but also important to just remind we're already doing this. We have published twice on our website a list of CE courses that are within topics of DEIB. And so we're already doing this, but again, this was in our sunset report as a new issue that we wanted to see. Any questions or comments from the committees on issue 10, from the board on issue 10, excuse me. Okay. All right, the next two issues are kind of related to each other, optometric and optician business issues. Issue number 11 has to do with online optical businesses and registration requirements. What is the prevalence of businesses providing services to California consumers beyond the board's regulatory framework? The board should advise the committees on the number of entities that may not be in compliance with California's current registration or licensure laws. Does the board need additional enforcement tools or resources to increase compliance with the current registration requirements? As you see in our draft response, and as we've talked about several times at recent board meetings, within our sunset report, we had raised a new issue regarding certain optical businesses and registration requirements. And so we are aware that there are optical retail entities that operate within our state that claim to be exempt from all board oversight. We've talked about this issue. These are entities that have physical storefronts where consumers do show up and receive eye exams. Often these exams are performed by unlicensed individuals who are working under the direction of a licensee. There may be certain aspects of telehealth involved in these exams as well. These entities claim to be exempt because they claim that all of the exam activities and fitting, adjusting, and dispensing of any prescription products are performed in a space that they claim is subleased to an ophthalmology corporation, and we don't regulate ophthalmology. We believe, as we stated in our sunset report, that optical entities should be registered because they are providing optical services for the general public. We also indicate in this response it's impossible to know the extent of online entities that may be operating and also furnishing or dispensing or providing products to California consumers within our state. We've talked about our efforts within unlicensed activity on these online entities, and tools are a little limited there. But we do, use our citations and other enforcement powers to try to effectuate and stop that unlicensed activity. We have more to say about the specifics on the optical entity registration issue in the subsequent issue that we'll talk about in a moment, which is issue 12. But is there any questions or comments about the draft response for issue 11?
I have a request, I guess. As always, I like the responses generally. They have a good background. They present, I think, a full response to the request. My only concern, and I've seen this in a couple of them so far, as they say in the journalism field, you bury the lead sometimes. And the question that we're apparently answering on this one, issue 11, is, does the board need additional enforcement tools? They're really asking us, is there something we would like to see? I think the answer should be yes, because you've noted farther down in your response that the board has little to no recourse to force compliance. So apparently further tools are required to force compliance. So my thought would be to just start it with a clear and concise answer to the question we're being asked. Yes, we could use additional enforcement tools or resources to meet the various needs that are already very ably described in this response.
Do you have an idea about what those tools would be?
Not being as knowledgeable in the field as you and your staff, I can't speak to that. Whether it would be to throw it back to the legislature to ask them to see what tools they have available to them, or that might already be on the books, that could be more specifically applied to our area, I'm not sure. But I think we can certainly give them a better response to their question by saying, you're asking us if we need it, we absolutely do for all of these reasons, and any input might be appreciated. I would also ask council if he has any thoughts on other options that might be available to us, because this is not my field. So I don't want to speak in too great detail in this regard.
Member Club, I think you make a good suggestion in terms of tools. We have, I think it's issue 16 that we will get to here in a bit, which has to do with citation and fine program. And we do make some suggestions to help us out there. And I think there may be a way to tie some of that answer and response back to this one. Admittedly was being a little bit vague about some of the tools, because when we have talked specifically about tools in the past, that's, for example, website disconnect was, I think, something that we had talked about within unlicensed activity being related to the telephone disconnect authority that we presently have. And that was not something that was very popular. So, if there are new tools out there that folks are aware of, I would love to know about them. But within unlicensed activity, it's very hard to stop unlicensed activity, especially for online entities anywhere. They move across states, they move across countries, and it's very challenging to get those sorts of players to come into compliance. So again, in issue 16, we talk about citations and the fine levels that exist, which haven't been touched in a long time. And so there may be, I think we could, to your point, we could amend some of the response here and point toward some of the information we're saying in issue 16.
And that makes sense. I think council wanted to add something, though.
I was just going to say, it's also important to remember that this is not the end of the conversation. This is initial response to legislative questions. So what the board should be doing here is kind of deciding whether or not you are giving enough direction to staff with the response and to the legislature. And there's other issues you're concerned about and stuff. So, but I can also let Member Clemens discuss more because he has a hand raised.
Thank you, council. I'm unaware of anything new under the sun, but I think, to Member Kleppa's point, if we were confident that we had additional resources in our investigations and compliance unit, that we would find more unlicensed and otherwise bad actors, we could say that. More money for more people generally would work if we believe that there are folks out there who are unlicensed and unfound. The only problem with that is, given California's budget situation, I think we all know what the answer to that is going to be. However, putting it on the record, in my mind, wouldn't hurt.
Would you like me to work with Member Kleppa, since he's sitting next to me, to maybe craft a motion?
Yes. Yeah, let's do that.
Great, we'll come back.
Okay, we'll come back to it. Issue 12, landlord-tenant relationships, registration of optical businesses. Are statutory updates necessary? The board should advise the committees on the proposed statutory change and how it would encourage or ensure compliance with California laws for optometry and optical business relationships. Again, this item comes from our new issue within our sunset report, where we have talked extensively about wanting to make sure there are no loopholes, that optical entities that are providing optical services for the general public are required to register with our board to do those activities. I've been working with stakeholders on this topic. And so the draft response indicates again what we want to see. We want to see optical companies that are providing optical services for the general public to be registered. A landlord-tenant relationship, which is similar to what exists elsewhere in the law, would be one way of accomplishing that effort. There may be also additional ways to clean up language within the statute. There is some definitions, for example, on the optician program that say that a dispensing ophthalmic business is a business that dispenses prescriptions issued by physicians and surgeons and optometrists. There are other definitions that say that a dispensing business is one that performs optical services for the general public. entities that are advertising or assisting with the facilitation of eye exams or dispensing, selling, fitting of prescription eye products should be required to register with the board. And so our draft response indicates all of what I just mentioned, but I also want to let the board know that I am working with stakeholders on this issue, and we will be continuing to work with those stakeholders in the weeks and months that come, and look forward to hopefully arriving at a legislative statutory framework and a solution that is workable. Again, I want to mention that we're not intending to interrupt or disrupt those entities that are already registered with the board appropriately. So the idea and the design here is to make sure that everybody that's supposed to be registered is registered. So again, encouraged, I've had sort of an initial preliminary conversation with stakeholders, and we'll look forward to continuing to work with them on this issue. But happy to take comments or questions from the members at this time regarding our draft response for issue 12, which again has to do with the registration of optical businesses.
This is Member Linden. I just want to say thank you for continuing to work through this issue. This is something that has affected the board since the last sunset review. And so it's still an issue that we're dealing with. And so I'm hopeful that at this next sunset review cycle, everyone can come together and find some solutions to address this issue, which has been plaguing us for a while. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Linden. I don't see any other comments or questions, so we can move on. I know we still need to come back to item 11, issue 11, but we'll move on. Issue 13 is, again, this was one of our new issues from our sunset report. This is the definition of person that exists in 3040, and the committees want to know how this would improve our enforcement capabilities and whether there's any similar changes that need to be made on the optician side. Our draft response indicates again the reason why we're seeking this change. There has been a case in the past that the board sought discipline on where through that process it was determined that 3040 did not apply to a corporation. We want to make clear that by amending 3040 to include corporation within that definition of person, but also making clear that only a natural person is who can be licensed as an optometrist. It's a very similar language to what medical board has in their practice act. And appreciate the committee is asking whether there may need to be some changes on the optician side, because there in fact may need to be some clarification. There are, of the 4 optician registration that we have, 2 of them are business licenses, but the other 2 are individual. Our spectacle and contact lens are for individuals, and there may need to be some adjustments to the statutes, specifically section 2550, to make clear that that also is for an individual, which is a natural or human being. So this is our issue, again, that we're just reiterating our feelings about. Happy to take any questions or comments on issue 13 from the board. Seeing none, I will move on. Issue 14. Issue 14 again is a mobile optometric office issue. Does the current cap of 12 offices still make sense? The board should advise the committees on whether it believes the cap of 12 mobile optometric offices for the initial licensure period is necessary, or if the cap should be increased during the first renewal period. As I stated when I testified on this question back on March 4th, we're not aware of any consumer protection benefit that is derived from limiting the cap. The entire point of the mobile optometric office program was to increase access to care. So we don't think that cap would be consistent with that intended purpose of the new program. And that is the answer that we have for issue number 14. Any comments or questions from the members on that one?
I have a comment. I don't know what the original intent as far as the initial cap, but I'm thinking that if someone was new to this process, perhaps making it a more manageable amount to oversee, because there could be some, if they're not delivering the proper care, whatnot, having it reduced so they can get basically their procedures, policies all buckled in before they expand to beyond the 12. That is only my thought, where maybe having that initial cap would be beneficial to the public.
It's a fair point. I also don't know exactly where the cap of 12 came from. So far as I can tell, the board didn't discuss that at any public meeting. Each permit has to be individually applied for. So you don't automatically get 12. You have to individually apply for each one. And you have to meet all of the requirements for each permit. So you don't automatically get a second one just because you had the first one. So I think our licensure process would, still ensure that that consumer protection is probably at that forefront there still. But you're right; it's a fair point that could be a reason why that cap was originally there. So, any other comments or questions from members? And remember, Bragg, if you want to, if there's a change that you want to suggest. Okay.
No, I was just bringing it up that maybe that's just my perspective, that maybe we leave it there, but
Okay.
if it's fine to remove it, I'm fine with that as well.
I will also say I can come assist individual members if they would like help crafting a motion. Just let me know. Also, I think we are ready to go back to, was it issue 11?
Yeah. All right. If there's nothing else for 14. I don't see anything else for 14. We can go back to 11.
All right, so my motion for issue 11 is I move to amend our response to issue 11 to request more enforcement tools and authorize staff to reference any other requests for additional resources made by the board, as well as ask for the legislature's guidance for possible additional resources.
So just a comment, when we say resources, are we talking about money to increase staff?
Tools to allow staff to do what they need to do, whether that be, citation tools, other types of administrative issues that they can place in the way of the wrongdoer. Whatever those tools are, I think what we're doing here is simply asking the legislature to consider those we already have available and possibly consider providing us with any other tools that they believe might be available to us to, effectuate this outcome.
I think also to clarify too is that we use resources kind of give staff some more flexibility and say like referencing like another issue we brought up, or if there's another request we have before the legislature for something similar.
Okay, we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Second, Clemens.
Okay, we have first and second. Can we open it up for comment from the public in the room? Okay, seeing none. Public comment from the WebEx.
This is a moderator for members of the public on WebEx. If you would like to make a public comment on this item, please click the raise hand icon. Or if you're an audio only participant, you can raise your hand by pressing *3 on your device. All right, and this is a moderator. Appears there are no requests for public comment at this time.
Thank you, moderator. If we can do a public, if we can do a roll call vote.
Member Clemens?
Aye.
Member Dawson?
Aye.
Member Sue?
Aye.
Member Kleppa? Dr. Wong?
Aye.
Dr. Wong?
Aye.
Dr. Bragg, aye. Vice President Linden? Aye. President Garcia?
I vote aye.
Motion passes.
Move on.
Yep. Thank you, members. We're going to go to issue 15. These are next few issues have to do with some enforcement items. Issue 15, probationary registration. Should the board have additional authority to issue a probationary registration? Should advise the committees on the number of applicants who may benefit from a probationary registration, the number of registrations denied where such a registration would have been more appropriate, and if the board could provide any estimated enforcement cost savings. As a reminder, this issue, the probationary registration issue for opticians, comes from us. It was within our sunset report as a new issue that we wanted to see. Again, as a reminder, on the optometry side, we have this authority already. We do not have this authority on the optician side. When opticians were housed within the Medical Board of California, this authority existed there. And when the program was transferred to our board, that probationary authority did not transfer. So we would like to see the same authority on the optician side as we have on the optometry side. But specific to the questions that we received from the legislature here, we've included in the draft response that information, which you can see. I won't read for you. These are fairly small numbers, however, and not a lot of workload that we would expect, but we think it's an important public policy measure that both maintains our ability to protect consumers, but also provide a pathway for individuals to get licensed and work, while still allowing the board to maintain close ties on them pursuant to that probationary registration and the associated requirements that would come with it. So happy to take any comments or questions, feedback from members on this item, issue 15. Very good. We'll move on to item 16. This is citation and fine program and cost recovery. The board expends significant resources on enforcement efforts that are not always recouped. Are statutory updates necessary? The board should update the committees on any statutory changes that might enhance the citation program or the board's cost recovery efforts. While the legislature didn't directly ask us to answer this question in the recommendation, it does state in the background for this information, for this issue, that we do not have authority as a board to seek cost recovery for citations, but that there is one other program in DCA that does, and sort of not suggestion, but the insinuation is might that make sense for our board too. So in the draft response is some information, some background information about the topic of cost recovery and citations. Under present law, cost recovery is not allowable for citations for our board and most of the boards in the department because it's not considered formal discipline. And under present law, the amount that we can cite for is capped at $5,000 on the optometry side and $2,500 on the optician side. We don't think it makes sense to allow for cost recovery for citations. The other program in DCA that has that ability has that ability because they take products that are being sold to consumers and they test them. They subject them to rigorous testing, including a flammability test. And if that product is found to be in violation, they charge the violator for the cost of all of that testing. That's the cost recovery component. We don't operate that way. We don't confiscate anything and test it for compliance. So I don't think it would make sense to allow for a cost recovery for our citations. And we give an example of why in the draft response and how that can inflate the costs. However, as an alternative to allowing cost recovery for citations, there are a few options that the legislature could propose if it wanted us to cite at higher amounts. The main statute that caps citations at $5,000, excuse me, has not been touched in 25 years. And so that could be a place that the legislature could start. If they increase the cap to 5,000, it would enable programs to initiate a regulatory process to increase increase their citation amounts. Alternatively, the board could just grant could grant us the authority, which it has done in a few places. Within the non-resident ophthalmic dispensers act, there is authority to fine at amounts significantly higher than 5,000. And similarly, under the landlord tenant provisions within BPC 655, we also have the authority to cite and fine at much higher amounts than the 5,000 cap. So that is our response for this issue, again, which has to do with citations and cost recovery. Do not think it makes sense to allow for cost recovery on citations, but if the legislature wants to see us fining at higher amounts, they could grant us the authority to do so. Any questions or comments? Member Kleppa.
Yeah, I have a question. When you talk about cost recovery, you're talking about recovering the citation amount that is cited to a licensee, correct?
No.
No?
Cost recovery is the cost that we spent investigating that case. So a complaint comes in, or we start working it, staff realizes we're going to have to send this out to an expert witness for review. We pay our expert witnesses to do that review. If that complaint leads to formal discipline and accusation and a decision that is adopted, we're going to ask for cost recovery to include those investigatory costs. Those investigatory costs will include the subject matter expert that we paid. It will also include attorney general costs and any Office of Administrative Hearing cost if there was a hearing that was conducted in front of a judge with not a translator, but a
Court report?
court reporter. Thank you. All of those costs we would ask for the judge to agree to allow us to recoup those as cost recovery.
Okay, so those would be added on to the fine amount, the citation amount, yes?
Well, right now, cost recovery is not allowed for citations. Are you asking if it would be?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be. And so in the example that we give here, that's what we've tried to show is that the citation amount was X. It was appealed to a hearing. We incurred Y costs. If those costs were eligible to be recovered, you can see what those numbers are. It's significantly higher. I think a risk in allowing cost recovery for citations is that it may chill your ability to appeal if the risk of losing meant that now you were going to owe so much more money than the cited amount in the first place. I think as the legislature outlines it in the background paper, what they're looking at is that from our sunset report, we break down how much we spend as a board, and we break that down across our 3 units, admin, licensing, and enforcement. And they take the amount of money that enforcement costs, let's say it's $1 million, in our staff, salaries, benefits, everything. And then they say, that's how much you're spending. You're bringing in cost recovery a much lower amount. There's a big delta between what you're spending and what you're bringing in. And, you know, the insinuation is almost that enforcement isn't paying for itself. Enforcement won't ever pay for itself. Licensing is what pays for everything, right? Application and renewal fees is what pays for everything. These additional costs that we try to recover in cost recovery are the costs, again, that we incur investigating it. We have to use the AG. We have to use Office of Administrative Hearings, administrative law judges, so on and so forth. We pay for all of that. We pay the AG to work our cases. So when an applicant or a licensee a decision is arrived at, a proposed decision is adopted, we try to include those costs so that we can recoup them.
Is the concern that a licensee would not know upfront what their financial risk is if they decided to fight a citation?
Yeah, I don't know how they would. The rate that the Attorney General charges can change. It changed July 1 of last year, for example. And then we found out about it after. So yeah, I mean, the rates change. Yeah, I mean, we're just not fundamentally set up like the other program that can confiscate products and then recoup those costs. So
Is the alternative idea, as you're apparently indicating here, to raise the maximum amount of citation can be imposed? And not collect the cost so that any licensee would know going in what kind of financial concerns they'd be facing?
I'm not proposing at all that we raise the caps. I'm just suggesting to the legislature, if they want us to fine more, then they could make that choice. I don't state it here, but I think I think what we're doing, we should just keep doing. I think our citation program is working. 3 years ago, we had very, very few citations because we weren't being very active in enforcement, and we're much more active now. We're doing CE audits. We've as we've talked about, unlicensed activity, so on and so forth. So the information here is just trying to respond to the legislature's point about, well, maybe you guys, maybe cost recovery would make sense for your program. I don't think it would, but if the legislature wants enforcement to, pay for more of itself, increasing the fine amounts would be an option. And there's precedent within other boards. Other boards, Contractor State License Board, for example, can fine a contractor who aids and abets unlicensed activity at an amount much higher than $5,000. So the legislature has engaged in specific cases where, for specific violations, where higher amounts would be appropriate. And so in this draft response, I'm just intending to, I guess, in a sense, remind them of those prior efforts that they've done, both for our program, and that remains a possibility for us as well. So that all being said, I think our citation program across both optometry and opticianry is working well, and I'm proud of it and proud of what the staff is doing.
Okay, I think there's another comment that I'll defer to.
I don't think there's any question that most of the people whom we license are attempting to do things correctly. And I don't think there's any question that our investigative arm goes after people in any sort of whimsical fashion. Every case that has arrived before me in my brief tenure on this board has been very well researched. All of the documents I've seen that indicate we are pursuing enforcement action go far beyond the shadow of any doubt that I could come up with that someone has engaged in negative activity. I believe that having real consequences out there actually can deter people from taking dumb or intentional actions that could jeopardize their license. I look at something that says this artificial cap has not been raised in 25 years. 80 to 90% of, CPI difference right there. There's nothing saying that if we changed our caps from $5,000 to $10,000, we would have to charge people $10,000 if they violated something. We could slide anywhere along that scale that we liked, but it would give us appropriate latitude. And I do think that increasing the amount of money we could charge people for egregious activities would make some sense. So I'd be happy to make the motion suggesting that we raise our, that we suggest to the legislature that they alter Business Professions Code 125.9 to change the cap from $5,000 to $10,000. And after discussion, I'd be happy to make that motion if my colleagues think it's a good idea.
If I can just follow up, I agree with Member Clemens. Given your responses to our discussion on cost recovery, to have a kind of almost a secret additional fine, which would then be added on to the public fine, which would be the costs that be recovered, seems unfair. So, and it's what they do with attorney's fees and contracts. You don't know how much you're really going to pay until you end up having the case over and you pay $100,000 in attorney's fees for a $10,000 judgment. That's a very bad surprise for somebody. You don't want to have that situation for a licensee who makes a small mistake and is suddenly out of business because they've got to pay 10, 20, 30 grand in costs. So I understand that position of our executive director. I agree with Member Clemens that we should raise our caps. So that is a public deterrent and not a secret deterrent that would keep people from doing wrongdoing.
And just as a reminder to the board, any raise, whether it's within the general BMP code at 125.9 or within our specific practice acts, would more than likely require a regulatory effort to actually implement.
Oh,
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
this is Member Lennon. I just want to emphasize that when we are raising citation amounts, citations are informal discipline, right? And so they differ from formal discipline. Citations can be more easily, distributed throughout. I feel like I would just want to emphasize, I think it would be very important if we're talking about something like potentially doubling citation fees. I'd want to make sure that, I try to look up the citation factors right now, it's just to make sure that there are appropriate safeguards in place where if you're really going to, increase someone's citation by that much, let's really make sure that it was very egregious. It was a blatant disregard for the law or repeated violation of the law. I would want to make sure that the citation factors we have can kind of make sure protections like that are in place if we were to increase these amounts at all.
It's a fair point, Member Linden. And again, if the statute was increased to any amount higher than where it is now, to effectuate any of that, we'd have to go into our regs, and that would be a process, again, that would require memos and other items to come before this board for approval before it ever even got out to public comment. So it'd be a very, very public process in that way.
I was going to say, if there was a motion on this, granted, again, this is still discussion, so you guys can leave it as is and let the legislative process go forward. But I did draft a motion that would be, I move to amend our response to issue 16 to request the legislature consider increasing the citation cost caps. Also, Member Clemens, I could come over there and work with this, you.
In accordance with consumer price increases since the past 25 years, something along that. I'm not set on $10,000.
We could just leave it vague and staff could work with the legislature on that. Unless you specifically unless you specifically want that, I'm just letting you know that it's okay to leave it a little vague.
I defer to your better judgment.
This is your motion. This is your choice.
I move your language.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Do we have any comment from the audience? Any comments from anyone on WebEx?
This is the moderator for members of the public on WebEx. If you would like to make a public comment on this item, please click the raise hand icon. If you're an audio only participant, you can raise your hand by pressing *3 on your device. All right, and it appears there are no requests for public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you, moderator. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Member Clemens?
Aye.
Member Dawson?
Aye.
Member Sue?
Aye.
Member Kleppa?
Aye.
Dr. Wong?
Aye.
Dr. Bragg? Aye. Vice President Linden? President
Aye.
Garcia?
I vote aye. Okay, moving on.
Okay, moving on to item 18, board technology issues, telehealth and emerging technology. Are statutory updates necessary? The board should update the committees on the issues of telehealth and AI, including whether,
17.
did I skip an item?
No, we just,
Oh, 17. I said 18, sorry. Issue 17. Telehealth, emerging technologies, board should update the committees on issues of telehealth and AI, including whether the board believes any statutory changes may be necessary. We have a very short and brief response here. We agree with what the legislature is stating here. We do have a telehealth and emerging technology work group. They have met a few times in the past 6 months to discuss general topics of telehealth and emerging technologies, and we anticipate and expect that work group to continue its efforts in that area. Any recommendations or ideas or suggestions that it has would, as a work group, need to come before the board and then be formally adopted or decided on by this body. So look forward to the 2-member work group continuing to do its job and work in this area. And I do want to say that the the legislative committee did a really good job, I feel like, with this entire background paper, but the information that they have included within this topic, telehealth, I thought was especially well done. And so certainly encourage all of the members to, especially our non-practitioner members, our public members, to really look at that information. And I think there's a lot of interesting items that they've mentioned, especially with AI and other emerging technologies. So the work group will continue to meet in that regard. I do expect some of those meetings to be publicly available meetings and not just work group meetings, but as those decisions are made, agendas and notices will be provided. So that's our response for this issue. Happy to see if there's any comments or questions from the members, especially those that are engaged in this work. Good. Okay, all good. All right. Issue 18, federal contact lens rule in conflict with California statute. This actually was one of our items that we pointed out in the sunset report. We're being asked to advise whether we believe California law should be amended to remove any discretion for a provider to not provide a patient's contact lens prescription to conform to the federal rule. I frankly think we don't have a choice. The federal law says what it says, and state law is not a lawyer, but my understanding, state law can't undo that. Federal law does not provide any discretion to not provide the contact lens prescription, whereas our law does. And so I believe our state law simply needs to be changed to point to the federal regulation. Doing that, amending the statute in that way would be entirely consistent with how the spectacle lens prescription state law is written. In that context, the spectacle lens state law prescription statute points to the federal regulation. So every time the federal regulation is updated, our state law stays current. Something similar should probably be done with the contact lens rule to ensure that we have conformity. But happy to take questions or comments on issue 18. No? Okay. Seeing nothing, we're almost to the end of this item. Item 19, issue 19 is just technical changes. If there are any technical non-substantive amendments that the board has. I've had a few preliminary conversations with staff at the legislature regarding this specific item in issue 19, and again, very technical changes. We will be working with them on that. There's a few places where not just like gender or verb tenses maybe need to be updated, but there's places where we refer to interchangeably a registered dispensing optician and a spectacle lens dispenser. They're not the same thing. So there's a few areas where we just need to clean up the language to be clear. On the non-resident dispensing ophthalmic lens dispenser, it talks about a person shall not furnish or ship or mail. It should say person or entity because those are really businesses. So small technical items like that we need to look forward to working together on. So that's issue number 19. Comments, questions? Okay. The last one is just whether the board should be extended. And of course, we believe that it should. A standard extension period and sunset review is 4 years. So that's what we're asking for. We do have one aspect of our program, the mobile optometric program, which has a sunset date of, I think, 2035. Thought about asking for a 10-year sunset, but we'll stick with 4 and look forward to working with the legislature throughout the rest of this year on this process. So I think what we need to do is have a motion to approve the amended responses within those items that had those amended responses, and an overall, or perhaps it can all be done in one motion, and then an overall approval of the entire responses. Following that, staff would work with council, make sure that we've incorporated all of those items, and then we would deliver the responses to the committees. So council, I think if we could, is it possible to do this all in one motion, if it, including all of those amended responses, and then
I was actually just drafting a motion.
there you are.
Quick question, I guess, for the board. I'm going to include some language giving staff the ability to make non-substantive changes, which I'm going to say include background information, technical changes, clarifying language. Is there any concerns with that? Cool. Give me 1 second to take a proofread of this.
You're good. Take your time.
While we're waiting, I did see the video of you and Dr. Garcia in front of the legislature. Very impressive, gentlemen. Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Since we have a few minutes, I just want to say, Pruden, thank you for expertly walking us through this. It's very complicated. It's a lot of information. Thank you to the board for the really good amendments. I think they all make sense. Something, and the product that we have today, I think is something we can all be proud of moving forward. So also thank you to the staff. The staff has done a lot of this work behind the scenes throughout this whole process, and we have more work to do. But thank you to the staff that are here and back at the office, and thank you to the board.
Thank you, President Garcia. Yeah, there's a lot of staff listening online, so I'm sure they appreciate that. Thank you.
Sir, just a Member Martin, just a silly question. If Moo gets to be around till 35, don't we technically have to be around with them till at least then? Anyway?
Yeah, probably. I mean, we're not going anywhere, right? I don't think. Yeah, I think I would guess that the 10-year extension is to make sure that providers have some certainty and clarity, right, that the program will continue to exist. But yeah, not a silly question.
Should I just read it off and let someone say I move as?
Yeah.
Great. So the motion would be, I move to approve the responses, including the directed changes approved by the board at today's meeting, and authorize staff to finalize the responses, including making non-substantive changes, such as including background information, clarifying language, and making any technical or grammatical changes.
Okay, would someone like to make that motion?
I'll make that motion as stated by council.
Okay, and we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Member Wong, I'll second it.
Okay, a first and a second. I'd like to open up for any comment from members in the audience. It's open for any comments from anyone on online, WebEx.
This is the moderator for members of the public on WebEx. If you would like to make a public comment on this item, please click the raise hand icon, or if you're an audio only participant, you can raise your hand by pressing *3 on your device. And it looks like we do have a request from Ruby Garcia. Ms. Garcia, I will request to unmute your microphone. You'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Yes, I just wanted to thank Greg Pruden on your staff and the board. It was a great meeting, and I compliment you. Thank you so much for representing all of us.
Also, Ms. Garcia, you had a question from earlier. Did you want to raise it up right now?
No, I'll wait to another time. Okay. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. Appears there are no further requests for public comment.
Okay, thank you, moderator. If we can have a roll call vote, please.
Member Clemens?
With thanks for all the work to make this happen. Aye.
Member Dawson?
Aye.
Member Sue?
Aye.
Member Kleppa?
Aye.
Dr. Wong?
Aye.
Dr. Bragg? Aye. Vice President Linden?
Aye.
President Garcia?
Aye. The motion passes. Okay, we're going to move on to item 7, discussion and possible action on 2025 legislation impacting the board, DCA, and/or optometry or opticianry. Pruden.
Thank you, President Garcia. And I think we should be able to get through this. I think we have lunch around 12:30 as pickup, so I think we'll be okay. Item 7, discussion and possible action on the legislation that we've identified. The first item is AB 667 by Solash, Professions and Vocations, License Examinations, Interpreters. Since we have put together this material, this bill has been amended and no longer impacts this board. The amendments state that its provisions do not apply to healing arts boards, which are in Division 2. That's where we're located in the Business and Professions Code. And so I do not believe we actually need to engage on this bill any longer. We will continue, staff, however, will continue to monitor it and track it as we're still early in the legislative process. It could always be changed back. But if that's okay, I will move on to the next bill since it doesn't presently impact us. Okay. The next bill is SB 351. I am just flipping along to my materials here. Thank you, sir. SB 351 by Cabalden Health Facilities. Reason for the bill. This is a bill right now that presently only impacts medical and dental practices. It does not impact optometry at the moment. But this bill, according to the author, is trying to get at private equity firms that the author believes have infiltrated the healthcare system. And that's the heart of this issue. So this bill would prohibit a private equity group or hedge fund involved in any manner with a physician or dental practice doing business in this state from interfering with the professional judgment of those physicians or dentists in making healthcare decisions and exercising power over making decisions regarding coding and billing procedures for patient care services. The bill also would entitle the Attorney General to injunctive relief and fees and costs to enforce the provisions of the bill. The background on this bill is that it's attempting to codify and strengthen existing corporate practice of medicine and corporate practice of dentistry prohibitions. It borrows a lot of its language from the medical board's existing guidance on the prohibition against the corporate practice of medicine, but it also adds a few other additional triggers. Again, this bill is trying to continue essentially a state level trend of trying to limit the influence of private equity and hedge funds in healthcare. The Attorney General already, for example, reviews when hospitals are sold and things like that. So again, it applies to two groups, hedge funds and private equity, when they're involved in medicine and dental clinics. So there's no present impact to optometrists or the board. The reason why we put it on the agenda is because the same private equity and hedge fund issues that exist in medicine and dentistry exist elsewhere in healthcare, including in optometry. What we're asking for with this bill is to just keep watching it and performing some research to try to understand a little bit better about the existing corporate practices, corporate practice of medicine prohibitions, and whether it makes sense at all for optometry to get included into this bill. So that's the ask at this time, but happy to take comments or questions from the members regarding SB 351 Cabalden Health Facilities.
Member Kleppa, my thought would be in agreement, I think, with your thought, which is optometry should be included. We should not have non-professionals telling professionals how to act as a professional. It's basically the rule for most other professions. It certainly should be the rule for the healing arts.
The board could certainly propose a motion to oppose unless amended or neutral if amended and wanting to see optometry get included.
And I'm going to ask the executive director, what do you believe would be the most effective move by the board to effectuate that outcome? Would it be neutral with a hope of amendment, or what would be the best way to approach this?
I mean, generally, oppose unless amended is saying when you take that position, you're trying to deliver a message that if these amendments are not taken, then we're going to oppose your bill. Neutral if amended is a little bit lighter of a touch. We'd really like those amendments to be taken. We'll go neutral. But if you don't take it, we could live.
Well, we certainly don't want to stop its application to other boards. So
Right.
in my mind, neutral unless amended would kind of send the right message that we're trying to send.
Yeah. It's April too. This bill's going to keep moving along the process. And so you can always update motions update your position too as bills change. And
Would you like me to make a motion at this time?
that's
Okay.
That's for you to,
My motion would be that our board adopt a position of neutral unless amended to add the optometry board to this bill to allow us to benefit from its elements as well.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Members, we all second.
We have a motion and a second. I'd like to open up for public comment from the audience.
Hello.
Christine.
Christine Schultz, representing the California Optometric Association. This is a big issue for optometry, and the California Optometric Association does have a supportive amended position on this bill as well. We think it should be amended to include optometrists in its provisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more comments from the audience? Seeing none, let's go ahead and open it up for comment from WebEx.
This is the moderator for members of the public on WebEx. If you would like to make a public comment on this item, please click the raise hand icon, or if you're an audio only participant, you can raise your hand by pressing *3 on your device. All right, and it appears there are no requests for public comment at this time.
Thank you, moderator. Let's open it up for roll call vote.
Member Clemens,
Aye.
Member Dawson,
Aye.
Member Sue,
Aye.
Member Kleppa,
Aye.
Dr. Wong,
Aye.
Dr. Bragg, aye. Vice President Linden, President Garcia.
I vote aye. Thank you.
right. We will move on to SB 470 by Senator Laird, Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act, teleconferencing. Since we have put together this material and included it in your packet, the bill has received an amendment. It now extends the present sunset date, which is Jan 1, 2026. It extends it, I believe, out 4 more years to Jan 1, 2030. These existing provisions are the provisions that we have been utilizing, especially when we meet as a committee. We enjoy the ability under these provisions when meeting as a committee for members to stay remote, provided we're using WebEx and cameras on, and a member of our staff is at a publicly noticed physical location. So it's a flexible provision that enables us to meet, and we would want to see these provisions within Bagley-Keene extended. So we believe SB 470 should be supported, and that would be our staff recommendation for this bill. Questions, comments from the members?
If I understand you, this bill is one that allows us to appear remotely. Is that right?
Yeah, we've been mostly taking advantage of that provision in the context of our committee meetings.
Okay. Is it reasonable for us, or is it appropriate for us to say something to the effect of hell yes?
I may not say that in my support letter to the author, but I could figure out another way to use a synonym that would be more appropriate.
Defer to your discretion on that. Then.
Is that a motion?
I think we have one more comment.
Yes, I am generally, I think, making sure that the members of state bodies who put in their time and effort should be facilitated in a way that allows them to get to their meetings. But I am troubled by the fact that a large number of journalist organizations are lending their names in opposition to this. I am personally firmly convinced that having an active and robust journalistic society of professionals keeps everyone else on their toes, which is a net benefit to society. I'd be interested in learning more about, before we run off and support this, I'd be interested in learning more about exactly what their concerns are and whether they outweigh the obvious benefits to us as individuals and other people who are similarly situated. So I'm wondering about the time frame on this one, when it is likely to be considered by the Assembly and Senate, and whether we have a little more runway to consider it. Also happy to be, I heard a vociferous hell yes on the other end of the dais, and if my colleagues feel the same way, obviously we can move forward. But I take pause by the fact that, you know, the Society of Professional Journalists of Northern California and many of their peers seem to have some deep concerns about this as well.
Member Clemens, all fair points. You looked through the committee analysis and saw that list. You're wanting to know maybe a little bit more beyond what they've already stated as to their reasons?
As we now say in the United States of America, I can do my own research.
Yeah.
I'm just curious what the timing is on us having an opportunity to weigh in, whether it is immediate or whether the legislative session is likely to allow us an opportunity to consider this perhaps at a subsequent meeting.
The answer is yes. We're still early in April. I think this bill is still in its first house, so it's still in the Senate where it started. It's gone through at least one, or if not both, of the policy committees it was referred to. I believe it has a referral to fiscal. Yeah, so it'll go to approach next. So we're not even in second house yet. So there's a lot of time. We could consider it at the July meeting as well.
My request to my colleagues would be, A, because the legislative process is as it is, and it may be a substantially different animal by the time we reconsider this in July, if that's our group wish, that we do punt this until July. Give me and anybody else who's similarly interested an opportunity to dig a little deeper, perhaps have some of these issues resolved between now and then. So I would personally appreciate it if we didn't consider it, or sorry, send out a message of support or opposition today.
Any other comments?
Just since there sounds like there might be some slight disagreement right now, as a reminder, you guys get to decide as a collective. So you can make motions, you can disagree with motions, you can vote no, you can abstain. There's lots of options. Consensus is nice, not required. This is your rodeo. You don't have to motion, Taylor. You just don't make a motion. You don't need to make a motion. You can just leave it be for now.
Yeah.
So
These bills will stay on our agendas going forward.
Okay. I have no opposition to Member Clemens' request for more time.
Cool. All right. Any other comments on 470? Okay. We will move on to SB 641. SB 641 by Senator Ashby, Department of Consumer Affairs and Department of Real Estate, states of emergency, waivers and exemptions. This bill does two main things. The first thing, well, not the first thing that it does, but the first thing that I'm going to mention that it does is perhaps the easier component of the bill. This first thing I'm going to mention has to do with emails. This is the bill that would give not just our board, but the other boards and bureaus within DCA the ability to require applicants and licensees to use email, or to provide us an email address, excuse me. So that's an important provision, as we just talked about, something that we've asked for in our sunset review report. The bigger thing that the bill does has to do with states of emergencies and waivers and exemptions. As this board knows, pursuant to the LA fires and the catastrophic destruction that has resulted, the governor issued an executive order that allowed for waivers of certain licensing provisions, including delinquency fees and replacement licenses. And those waivers were specific to certain zip codes that were identified. This board and most of the boards at DCA do not have any statutory authority to waive any of their own laws when an emergency happens. There is one program at DCA that staff is aware of that does, that is pharmacy. Pharmacy has the ability to issue waivers pursuant to emergencies that are state, local, or national. This bill would essentially codify waiver authority for all of the boards and bureaus. Not the same authority that pharmacy has. Pharmacy authorities, I believe, is limited to 90 days. This authority would be the duration of the emergency, with an allowance for an extension beyond that in the board's determination. There have been at least one, if not two, individuals that have reached out to our board wanting to seek relief under the governor's executive order, who were not eligible for that relief because while they suffered a catastrophic loss as a result of a fire, they were not located in a zip code that was identified in the executive order, and the fire that they were a victim of happened prior. It was the Ventura fire from last fall. And so, this is a significant policy proposal to give programs the ability to waive their laws when these emergencies are declared. A little unclear exactly what that process would look like. However, the bill doesn't exactly outline what that process would look like and how we would effectuate that. Is that decided by me pursuant to my delegated authority that exists in regulation? Is that decided by the board president? Does it have to be sanctioned by a board meeting? I think there's some questions about exactly how to implement it. But overall, staff believes that this is probably a good proposal in terms of a good idea to authorize programs to waive their laws when emergencies happen. Given some of those questions, though, we're asking just to keep watching the bill. Would like to reach out to the author's office and try to understand a little bit more about some of these implementation issues. Would also like to reach out to the Board of Pharmacy and figure out exactly how they implement the authority that they already have. So that's SB 641 and staff's analysis and review of the bill. And we're just asking to keep watching it and performance and research on it, and we'll come back at a subsequent date. Any questions, comments from the members?
Member Kleppa, the only comment I would have is I think I agree with you. I think this is a necessary addition to our toolkit, essentially, on how to properly oversee licensees who run into areas of concern that are probably not anticipated by standing regulation. A little more discretion would be useful. As far as who would create the authorization, and I know that, this is a bill, the bill will be amended, there will be changes. My thought would be maybe give the authority to the board to delegate to the executive director as necessary, so that there is an understanding within the entire board of exactly when this is applied and when isn't. Certainly, if we had an issue with someone in the Eaton area or in the Palisades, there would be no question about whether that authority would apply. If someone had a special situation, it may be something that the executive director may want to bring back to the board for a discussion on a better application of a rule. So again, something for the future to think about, but I agree overall with the position of the staff on this. Certainly a positive addition to the board's abilities to act.
Thank you, Member Kleppa. Any other comments or questions? Okay. We'll just keep working on it and researching it, and we'll come back. The last one is our sunset bill, SB 776 by Ashby, optometry licensure. This bill is set for hearing at the end of this month, April 28th. As I just said, this is our sunset bill. The bill has two items in it right now. Both are items that come from our sunset report. It would just simply update the name of a national examination that's presently out of date, and then it would allow for inactive licensees to acquire the retired license status. So it contains two policies that we suggested. It's in its introduced form, and this bill will continue to evolve throughout the process as we engage in sunset review. Just a moment ago, we were considering the sunset responses and those formal responses that are going to be delivered to the legislature. A lot of those responses are going to help inform the sunset bill and any future amendments that go into it. So SB 776 is our sunset bill. We would ask for a support on this bill and authorize the executive officer to continue working with the committees and the author on this bill pursuant to the sunset process. Comments, questions on SB 776?
Member Dawson, I have a procedural question.
Yeah.
So the sunset review was submitted. You both spoke at a hearing, and then Mr. Ashby created the bill.
Miss Ashby, yes,
Ms.
yeah.
Ashby, right after?
So we submitted the report first week of January. I don't remember the introduction date of the bill, but the bill was introduced after that. Following the submission of our sunset report, the legislative staff at the committees was reviewing it, analyzing the report. That review and analysis helped inform what the sunset bill language, as it was introduced, what language was going to be included in that. The background paper also comes out of that work. The background paper comes out of the legislative staff reviewing that sunset report and then determining what issues they want us to respond to. So when a bill gets introduced, they got to have some language in there, some amendment or new law. And the two items that they picked were those two items that we had suggested to them. So a good introduction on that bill. And we'll be looking forward to working with Senator Ashby to see some more things get amended into it. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Also, too, one other point with that might be to understand that there's deadlines to introduce bills with
Yeah.
the legislature. So they will introduce a bill and then amend it going forward to meet those deadlines.
Are there any other comments from board members on all of these legislative items?
I'm looking for a motion on SB 776 if the board wants to give it.
Member Dawson, motion to support.
Okay, we have a motion to support. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Do we have any comment from the audience? Any comments from WebEx?
This is the moderator for members of the public on WebEx. If you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the raise hand icon, or if you're an audio only participant, you can press *3 on your device. All right, and it appears there are no requests for public comment at this time.
Thank you, moderator. So we have a first and second to support SB 776 Ashby. If we can have a roll call vote, please.
Member Clemens,
Aye.
Member Dawson,
Aye.
Member Sue,
Aye.
Member Kleppa,
Aye.
Dr. Wong,
Aye.
Bragg, aye. Vice President Linden, aye. President Garcia.
I vote aye.
Member Clemens, did you second that? Thanks.
Okay, just for completeness, so are there any other comments from the members on any of the legislative items? Seeing none. Any more comments from the audience on any of the legislative items? Seeing none. How about on WebEx?
This is the moderator for members of the public on WebEx. If you would like to make a comment on this item, you can click the raise hand icon, and audio-only participants can raise their hand by pressing *3 on their device. All right, and it appears there are no requests for public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you, moderator. Yo Pruden.
Thank you, President Garcia. So next on our agenda is item 8. I think this item might be a little lengthier, and we just had staff go get lunch, go pick up the lunch for 12:30. I would like to propose that actually skip ahead to item 10. I think we can get through most, if not all of item 10. And then lunch will be here. We'll take lunch and come back from lunch and do item 8, if the board's okay with that. Okay. We will move to item 10. 10 is the executive officer's report. We're going to start with 10A, program update. We always start here with the staffing update. We presently have one vacancy for an enforcement analyst that we're recruiting for. Earlier this month, on April 1st, Valerie James started with us as an enforcement analyst. We're very excited to bring Valerie on board. She's been with the Chiropractic Board of California for the past several years as an enforcement analyst. I'm super excited that she's decided to join our team. So we give a warm welcome to Valerie. And effective April 30th, at the end of this month, Randy Love is going to retire from the board and state service. Randy has worked for the state for more than 23 years and for the board since 2009. They've held the following positions: enforcement analyst, lead enforcement analyst, assistant executive officer, and they presently serve as the administration and licensing manager. Staff is going to have a little get together for Randy at the end of this month and send them off properly. Really just want to give a public acknowledgement to Randy Love and all of the work that they've done. They've been a good partner to me as I've onboarded in this role over the last few years, and their experience working on both enforcement and licensing has served all of us very well. So we're sad that they've decided to retire, but also happy for their new adventures. So thank you, Randy, and we'll look forward to celebrating you at the end of the month. A copy of the current organizational chart is included at the end of this item. Just moving on to board items, our current strategic plan runs through the end of the year. We've hyperlinked within the materials to that existing plan. And because it's ending at the end of this year, we're going to need to engage in the development of a new one. And next week, I will have a meeting with DCA staff to begin the kickoff process. I've included a roadmap of what that process will look like at the end of this item as well. It's attachment B. I imagine it'll look somewhat similar to the process that the board just engaged on a little more than 18 months ago when we amended the strategic plan. There's an environmental scan or survey that is sent out to stakeholders, licensees, board members, staff, et cetera. Feedback is solicited, and this work will most likely occur over two board meetings later on this year. So stay tuned for more information and updates on strategic planning. Some committees and work group information. Our Consumer Protection and Public Relations Outreach Committee, led by Chair Clemens, met on February 21st of this year to discuss social media and outreach efforts, including our newsletter and use of listserv, which is the main ways that we communicate with our licensees and interested folks. And following that, following that meeting, we've implemented several changes that we're excited about. We've initiated a change on Breeze to include QR codes on the renewal notices that will inform renewing licensees about the board's listserv and social media accounts and give them a really easy way to sign up by scanning that QR code. We've also refreshed our listserv email list, our universe, by repopulating it with emails that are provided to us by our applicants and licensees when they apply through Breeze. Listserv and Breeze are two different systems. So we're excited about those changes, and we'll keep the board updated as they are implemented and rolled out. The Telehealth and Emerging Technologies Work Group met on April 2nd. The work group discussed the board's existing brochure, which we've hyperlinked in the materials. It's called Online Refractions, Not a Comprehensive Eye Exam. The work group tasked itself with proposing updates and revisions to this brochure, which was first created 9 years ago and hasn't been updated since then. The brochure only discusses online refractions and comprehensive eye exams and does not discuss vision screenings, for example. The work group will bring the proposed revisions to a future Consumer Protection, Public Relations, and Outreach Committee meeting for their review and approval. The work group also discussed the board's existing consumer notice, which is found in regulation, and discussed whether it may need to be updated to include other information, such as information regarding refractions, vision screenings, and comprehensive eye exams to better help consumers make informed decisions. Board staff and council will be researching these items. The work group also discussed the emergence of optometric and optical kiosks, which have been deployed in some states, including possibly in California. These kiosks allow consumers to receive eye exams via a telehealth-only model, and the tests are reviewed by licensed healthcare practitioners. consumers may be issued prescriptions for these lenses. The work group and staff will be researching how these models of eye care delivery fit within the regulatory landscape that we presently enforce. Lastly, for item 10A, our spring newsletter and outreach efforts, the spring edition of the Spectacle is in review with the department. We're expected to release it later this month. And then, as I mentioned a little bit earlier today, next week on the 17th, I will be traveling to the Herbert Wertheim School of Optometry and Vision Science, which is at UC Berkeley. I will be giving a presentation to, I believe it's the third year optometry students. So I'm looking forward to doing that with Dr. Wong and meeting with all those students. I think this will be the first time I've been in person at Berkeley, so I'm super excited for that.
I think it is. We're excited to have you.
Yeah. So that's item 10A. Any comments, questions from the members? I see Member Clemens.
Learn how to turn on my mic. Request to my fellow board members, following up on the Public Relations and Outreach Committee meeting. If you would, on your lunch break, whenever, check your social media, whether it's LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever it is. If the California Board of Optometry has a presence, would you please be kind enough to consider following it? You'll probably be notified when they post something, and would at those times, would you please consider reposting it yourself? Our representation to our constituencies and communities are diverse and broad, and we probably have a bunch of very interesting Venn diagrams that rarely overlap. And I think that getting the word out that we're doing this work might add some small new pebbles dropping into a larger pool that will increase visibility of what we're doing and attention to it. The social media work that the staff does is great, but without amplification from us, it has some very heavy barriers to get through. So if we could all put a couple minutes in each week on helping pass the message along, that would be lovely. I'm grateful and thanks.
Thank you, Member Clemens. I think that invitation was for also everyone who's out there listening in.
Follow, like, share. Right. We'll move on to item 10B, and can I just take public comment on these items at the end? Okay. We'll move on to item 10B. This is the enforcement program report. Within the enforcement unit, we also had a promotion recently. Scott Kurzweil was promoted from staff services analyst to associate governmental program analyst. So we're super excited for him and his promotion. Good job, Scott. Within this item, we've included the citations that have happened in the recent quarter and other disciplinary action as well. And we also report on the statistics and the CE audit statistics separately. So in your packet here for 10BI, you have the optometry program complaints report and the optician complaints report. What I like to try to do for the board on these items is pull out or point out any things that I've noticed. I certainly want to hear from you all if there's things that you've noticed, but it looks like on our optometry program at the moment that complaints are going to be fairly consistent. We still have one quarter to go, obviously, but they're trending to be consistent, if not even maybe slightly lower than where we were last year for optometry. So that's just one item that I noticed. Similarly with our citations, we're trending similarly this year compared to last year. We, one more quarter to go. We'll see where we end up, but our work in those areas is pretty similar from last fiscal year to this fiscal year. And the cycle time as well of closing investigations and complaints. This is PM3 cycle time for optometry. We're closing our investigations at a faster clip, if you will, than we were last year. And that's encouraging the progress that the enforcement team is making there. So that was some of the highlights that I saw from the optometry side. On the opticianry side, fairly similar things that I'm noticing. It does look like the optician program may, with 1 quarter to go, will likely have an increase in complaints this fiscal year compared to last fiscal year. Trending the same way for convictions within that optician program as well. But similarly to optometry, the cycle time has been improved, and so that's encouraging as well. And citations, we didn't have a whole lot of citations on the opticianry side last year. We had 7. This year we've got 3 so far. So with 1 quarter to go, we'll probably end up fairly similar in that regard too. On the CE audit stats, as we reported at the last meeting in February, we had a slight dip, if you will, in the number of audits that we were reporting. That has to do with the fact that our staff, who's in charge of this, is also in charge of our probation monitoring program and had to onboard and offboard several probationers in the last quarter or 2. So we're back to performing the number of audits that we expect quarter to quarter. With 1 quarter to go, we'll see where we end up, but the overall pass rate still needs to come up. We still would like to see that overall pass rate come up significantly. It's still too low. So as we've talked about in the past, strong encouragement for licensees out there to make sure that you're following your responsibilities and legal requirements when it comes to the CE requirements. That's your enforcement report. Any comments or questions from the members?
Just a question.
Sure.
Looking on the opticianry program, I keep trying to get that right.
You got it.
Under transmittals to Attorney General, target 540 days, year-to-date 524, so it's below target, which is good. Then it says quarter 2 686, year-to-date 686. I wasn't quite sure how those numbers correlated. Maybe you can help me understand. You see what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I see what you're talking. So we've only had one AG case this year on the optician program, and its total cycle time was 686 days. So it was larger than the target.
And these numbers, okay, the first column is a different fiscal year. I understand.
Yes.
All right. So the one case was a little bit over, but the other ones look just about on or in fact under.
Yeah, those 4 from last year had an average cycle time of 524 days. And then the one this year is 686. Yeah.
Now I get it. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Seeing no other comments or questions, I'll move right along to the examination and licensing program report. This is 10C. As we normally do within this item, we start with some breeze updates. Most of our recent breeze updates have been around the mobile optometric office program as well as the home resident permit program. But we also have recently made some other important changes. The probably most important change that we recently made has been reducing the retake period for applicants that fail the California Law and Regulations exam. We've cut that time down in half, from 180 days down to 90 days. So we're excited for how that's going to positively impact those applicants. We've also made a few security updates to our statement of licensure application. And so those updates recently took effect. Later this month, we will, when the new breeze release for April is put out, we will have our home resident permit application available, which we're really excited about. And we will also have the new look that we just mentioned for the renewal notices. Remember that new look involves the QR codes that licensees will now see on their renewal notice, which will help them sign up for our listserv and social media accounts. So we're excited about all those updates. We have some future updates coming on the optician program to combine the dispensing ophthalmic business into one. That's currently 2 applications that have to be completed. And we're also making some updates to the non-resident dispensing ophthalmic lens program to update those applications to make it clear that it is not just about contact lenses, but it's any spectacle or contact lenses that are being furnished into California from out of state. So we're excited about that. The next several attachments, A, B, and C, are just your overall stats in terms of applications received, licenses issued. Again, as a reminder, we're in that final quarter of our fiscal year, but this is also the time period when new grads are starting to get all their materials together. Most optometry students will graduate by the second week of May, so about a month from now. And we are expecting to receive a significant amount of initial applications, including NBEO scores, transcripts, fingerprint results, and the like. So we expect to be busy in May and June processing all of those applications. The final attachment is attachment C, and it gives you a graphic display of month by month and quarter by quarter, the various permits and applications that we issue in terms of both the volume, but also the timelines. All of the timelines are consistent with what we've been reporting in recent meetings. Our initial processing time for an optometrist applicant is under a week. All of our other application types are within a few weeks of all materials being submitted. So proud of the staff work and the licensing team for continuing all of that good work. Any questions or comments from the members on agenda item 10C, examination and licensing report? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to agenda item 10D. This is a reg update. As a reminder, this is a standing item that we include on our agenda to provide an update on prior board-approved regulatory packages. These are packages that staff is in various stages of working on. There are 5 of these such packages, and they are listed here. The 2 that have some change since the board last reviewed this material in February are items 3 and items 5, and we will be talking about those items later on in this meeting. So any questions or comments from the members about agenda item 10D, the regulatory update? No? Okay. Before I guess we conclude item 10, we need to take public comment. So any public comment in the room for item 10, item 10, A, B, C, or D?
Public comment from those on WebEx.
This is the moderator for members of the public on WebEx. If you would like to make a comment on this item, you can click the raise hand icon. And audio-only participants can raise their hand by pressing *3 on their device. All right, and it appears there are no requests for public comment at this time.
Thank you, moderator. Now it's time to consider a lunch break. Pruden?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't see lunch in the room, but we've been going for a while. I think we can use a break. Lunch should be here soon. Return in an hour? Huh?
1:30?
Yeah, say 1:30. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and end the meeting at this time. We'll reconvene at 1:30. Welcome back, board. We're going to go ahead and start where we left off. We're going to go on to agenda item number 8, which is the discussion and possible action to approve modified text and responses to comments and continue rulemaking to adopt Title 16 California Code of Regulations, Article 11.5, Section 1572, related to radio frequency technology and devices. Pruden, if you want to take that.
Sure. Thank you, President Garcia and members. We're going to talk about agenda item 8 related to radio frequency. Before you in your packet, quite a substantial amount of information here for this item. You have a staff memo. Within that memo contains summary of and proposed responses to the public comments that we received during the public comment notice period for this regulation. That comment period ended on September 23rd of 2024. We received numerous comments in support of the proposal, a few comments in opposition to the proposal. Following that public comment period, as the board will recall, in February of this year, we agendized the proposal for the purpose of seeking additional public comment to assist us in determining how to move forward with that regulation. Very appreciative of the additional comments that we received during that board meeting. And before you again, we have a modified proposal on this regulation. What does the modified proposal do? The modified text would make clear that this technology, the radio frequency technology and device, is used for the purpose of treating dry eye disease or syndrome. The modified text would specify a frequency range and would require temperature monitoring or temperature presets, which limit the temperature and rule out other devices that use RF and ablate the tissue. Those devices which ablate the tissue are considered electrical surgical units, are used in medicine, and are not appropriate to use to treat dry eye. So again, within this memo are the summary of the comments received pursuant to that comment period, our proposed responses, and then following the memo are the attached modified text, as well as all of the comments that we received during the 45-day period. In the modified text, I just want to note that for individuals that may be looking at the materials online, it may be a little difficult to determine exactly what is being modified. The materials as printed are a little bit more clear. So I just wanted to share that and cover that, and then discuss specifically where the modified text is. So it's in subsection C of the proposed regulatory text. We are propose a strike language that talks about heating the tissue and replacing it with treating dry eye disease or syndrome, because that is the purpose of this technology for this regulation. And then we also, again, specify the frequency range to be used and put in place language for temperature monitoring and controls with presets. We also propose to limit the temperature that is applied to the surface of the skin. So that's the modified text. Wanted to make sure that it was easily readable. At this point, I'm happy to entertain discussion and comments from the members about item 8, the modified text as proposed, as well as the comments that were received and the proposed responses that staff has put together. So any comments, questions from the members?
Member Bragg, I appreciate the staff responding to the issue concern about the neocollagenesis and the refutal to that about altering the tissue. I think that was very great research, and I appreciate probably most of the optometrists that submitted their letters of support. I think it's great that they weighed in on this process, and so I just wanted to thank them for letting their voices be heard.
No, I agree with Dr. Bragg. I do want to thank staff for all the work that they've put into this. There's been a lot of material that's been submitted, different letters from numerous different doctors and schools. And I agree. I think RF is definitely a technology that we do need to support. It's going to provide significant relief and treatment for those people who are suffering from dry eyes from all different parts of California. So thank you.
Any other comments from the board?
Red Council.
Yes.
Yes, Elizabeth Beetson Olson, Regulatory Council. I just wanted to follow up on the discussion that we had at the last meeting and let the board know that in our opinion and research, We don't believe that the radio frequency technology constitutes surgery under the Act. And that was a review of case law and the definitions of the terms that were used, statutes, and just general definitions.
Council. Any other board comments? I'll just kind of piggyback on all of your comments. I agree with all of you. I am a practicing optometrist, and dry eye MGD is one of the most common problems that we see in our offices. I would say over half of our patients have some degree of dry eye MGD, and it's one of the more debilitating conditions people will have. It causes vision problems, it causes severe discomfort, causes tearing, and it can eventually lead to corneal disease as well. So it is a significant problem. We have an access to eye care issue in California, especially in rural areas of California. And I think it's important that we allow optometrists to practice to the fullest extent of their training, providing them with new technology to add to their toolbox to treat dry eye disease. Again, this is clearly non-surgical. It's clearly safe. It's not a new technology at all. It's being used worldwide, and it's being used in other states to treat dry eye. So this is not a new concept. This is very well established, very safe, very non-invasive, absolutely non-surgical. And this would just allow Californians to access another new therapy to help relieve their dry eye conditions. So I would support it, and I welcome all comments for and against it.
Thank you, President Garcia. So again, what is before us is an item that would require a motion because we have modified text. We also have to approve the comments. Just as a reminder for the regulatory process with modified text, if the board should approve this item today, including that modified text, we would initiate a 15-day rulemaking where public comment would be able to be received on that modified text. And so that's what we would be doing following a board approval of this item today. That would require a motion and a second, if that's the board's purview.
Mr. Kleppa.
Yeah, I was going to make the motion to adopt the modified regulation and put it into place.
Thank you, Mr. Kleppa. We have a first. Do we have a second?
If I can, just to clarify, Member Kleppa, if you want to make that motion in the item, there is a suggested motion. It would be within the item, it would be on page 9. And it'd be option A.
Okay, I will amend my motion. My motion will be to adopt the proposed responses to comments and the modified text, and direct staff to send the modified text out for a 15-day public comment period. If no adverse public comments are received on the modified text, instruct the executive officer to take all steps necessary to complete the rulemaking process, authorize the executive officer to make any technical or non-substantive changes to the rulemaking package, and adopt Section 1572 as noticed in the modified text.
Okay, we officially have a motion. Do we have a second?
This is Member Wong. I'll second it.
Okay, we have a first and a second. I'd like to open it up for comment from the audience.
I think I have enough of the. Mr. Pruden was kind enough to make the black and white copy.
Hey, other cost. A budget.
I know, it's a budget. Well, I guess this is one more extra one just in case.
We could share. Thank you, sir.
It's fine.
You all the same? Are they all the same? In the copy.
Should be a
Sure, I'll share it.
Clarification of what we're supposed to have.
All set?
Before our commenter speaks, some of my members, I think, are a little confused. What you have is a letter, I believe, that's just been handed out. It's a 2-page letter. some folks may have an additional documents attached to it that looks like a printouts from internet searches.
Yes.
Some of you do not have that and you just have the 2-page letter.
I will explain what those contain, and if you have a chance to be next to somebody who has them, you can just glance at them for the time being.
The time is yours, sir.
Okay, thank you. My name is Steve Katolika. I'm the Executive Vice President of the California Academy of Eye Physicians and Surgeons. And I just want to mention Craig Kleiger has left big shoes to fill, and we appreciate the opportunity to appear in front of you on this particular very critical issue. First, I want to formally incorporate our previous comments that were provided earlier with today's testimony. And notwithstanding the board's earlier critique and decision to largely ignore that testimony, CAPES holds the position that our comments were then and remain accurate and relevant. In those comments, we mentioned the apparent illegal use of RF technology for treatment of dry eye already taking place. Attached to those of you who have the extra pages, attached are results of very recent research of optometry practices within California that boldly advertise that they use RF technology to treat dry eye disease, despite it being specifically prohibited until and only if these regulations are adopted. It doesn't reflect a comprehensive search of all California practices, but does serve to illustrate that apparent illegal use of RF to treat dry eye disease is already taking place over a wide area within the state. Thus, we formally request that at a minimum, the board delay any implementation of these proposed regulations until these and all optometry practices currently using RF technology for the purposes of treating dry eye disease cease and are investigated and disciplined. If that step's not taken, one is left to conclude that the proposed rulemaking is simply giving those practices a get out of jail free card. We also maintain that our previously submitted comments remain relevant with respect to vague and largely undefined education and training. A reading of the regulations, especially 152B1, could be construed as to require as little as listening to a salesman's guidance in the use of the machine as being adequate training. In closing, with respect to the basics of what surgery is and what it is not, we go back to basics to emphasize the bright line definition of the word altered. In other words, what surgery is and what it is not for the purpose of these proposed regulations. Simply omitting or ignoring the word altered as it applies to the RF process and undertaken in results after RF-based treatment is provided does not change the fact that the patient has experienced a surgical alteration. That is, unless these regulations choose to ignore the simple and unequivocal definition of the word, which Webster defines as made different in some way. That's the end of my formal comments. The documents you have are self-explanatory. You've got members of your organization, or at least members of your craft, out doing this already, and they're not being disciplined. We believe that in passing this regulation at this point, the timing would be to simply let them go free. And that shouldn't have happened.
All right. This is the moderator. Time is up. If you could have you wrap up, please, that would be great.
And I believe we have my President, Michael Curris, online.
Thank you, sir. Any more comments from the audience?
Christine Schultz, representing the California Optometric Association. We have had a chance to take a look at the revised language with the parameters included, and we don't have any objection to the changes to make sure that the devices can't be used for any kind of surgical procedure. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no one else in the audience, we'll go ahead and open it up to comments on WebEx.
All right, this is the moderator for members of the public on WebEx. If you would like to make a comment on this item, please click the raise hand icon, or if you're an audio-only participant, you can raise your hand by pressing *3 on your device. And it looks like we do have a couple requests for comments, so I'm going to go in the order received. First, I have call-in user 6. Call-in user 6, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning, and then you'll be pressing *6 on your device to unmute yourself.
My name is Michael Corris. I'm a practicing ophthalmologist in San Diego and president of the California Eye Physicians and Surgeons. I am testifying on behalf of the organization in opposition to the proposed regulations surrounding the use of radio frequency technologies for treatment of dry eyes by optometrists. A review of the issue memorandum dated 4/11 by the board is significant for the following. First, the wording of AB 407 as included in the BMP code clearly parses the definition of surgery in California. There are three distinct components: cutting, altering, and infiltrating, each unique. Cutting involves separation of tissue, which can be done mechanically or with a blade, using electrocautery or radio frequency. Altering is defined as changing tissue and is not explicit as to whether the means are internal or external. Chemical peels come to mind. Infiltration, the introduction of substances into tissue by any number of means, includes injection and transdermal delivery. The language is explicit and specific and has three constituents, each distinctive and standing on its own. Conflating these components is not the purview or authority of the Board of Optometry. Second, the memorandum incorrectly construes the concept of tissue as it is used in medicine. Tissue is defined as an assembly of similar cells and their extracellular matrix, which includes macromolecules such as collagen, glycoproteins, and enzymes. Neocollagenesis is the production of new collagen, a component of tissue. Quite plainly, the creation of new collagen is an alteration of tissue, which by definition includes collagen, and in this case engenders the application of, is engendered by the application of radiofrequency energy. Third, commentary in the
30
memorandum on
seconds.
page 3, which proposes that the sun exposure or warm compresses could constitute surgery, is indeed an observed proposition. No one contends that either of these modalities could do anything to induce collagenesis. One needs an instrument or intervention to induce collagenesis. It is collagenesis that constitutes tissue alteration. The memorandum thus, in effect, buttresses the argument that radiofrequency energy alters tissue. Notwithstanding the testimony at the February 15th meeting, where one witness recommended approval of the proposed rules based on the number of comments in favor and the numerous letters in support from practicing
All
opposition
right,
to
this is
state
the moderator.
optometric
Time
physicians.
is up, so we're going to move on to our next person who has requested public comment. Thank you. All right, our next person who has requested public comment, Ruby Garcia. Ruby, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
I am in support of this proposal for optometrists to practice this procedure. And just clarification, you've got to educate me. Are technicians who are not regulated under ophthalmologies, are they permitted to perform this this procedure? But once again, we are in support for optometrists to for this proposal. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. Next, I have Lucas Evanson. And Lucas, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
My name is Lucas Evanson, and I'm speaking on behalf of the California Medical Association. CMA stands by the position stated in our letter that RF technology alters tissue through neocollagenesis, and because of that, the use of RF technology constitutes surgery under the California Optometry Practice Act and is excluded from the practice of optometry. In the board's proposed response to our comment, the board writes, quote, collagen fibers are a protein and one compound of connective tissues, which also includes elastic fibers, amorphous ground substance, and extracellular fluid, but collagen fibers by themselves do not constitute human tissue. Therefore, RF tech does not constitute surgery because it stimulates a natural healing process via protein formation, end quote. While collagen is a component of connective tissues as stated by the board, collagen fibers are an integral part of human tissue. They do not exist in isolation and are essential to the structural integrity of skin, providing the framework and mechanical strength of skin. So by stimulating collagen growth, RF technology is in fact altering tissue. RF technology induces biological changes in the tissue structure, which constitute an alteration of tissue. This is also true regardless of whether the process is natural or via protein formation, as stated by the board. Just because the process is natural or non-mechanical does not mean that it is not an alteration. Additionally, CMA would like to clarify that it never contended or suggested that the use of heat constituted surgery, as implied by the board's response. CMA's response is narrowly tailored to the biological effects of RF technology, not heat in general. For those reasons, we ask that the board
30
reject the motion
seconds.
and withdraw the rulemaking package. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. Appears there are no further requests for public comment at this time.
Okay, so we'll bring it back to the board. We have a motion or any more discussion? Yeah, first and second. So we have a first and second. Yep. So we're going to go ahead and do a roll call vote.
Member Clemens?
I want to defer to the people who are actually professionals in the field, and I would pass on my vote.
Member Clemens, to clarify, are you abstaining?
Can I be called upon again at the end of roll call?
I'm okay with that.
Member Dawson?
I vote aye.
Member Sue?
Yeah, I'll abstain to vote.
Member Kleppa?
Aye.
Dr. Wong?
I vote aye.
Dr. Bragg, aye. Vice President Linden?
Aye.
President Garcia?
Would I?
Member Clemens?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay. We're going to move on to agenda item number 9.
Thank you, President Garcia. Members, our last substantive item for public discussion today is agenda item 9, discussion and possible action to initiate a rulemaking to adopt Title 16, California Code of Regulations, Article 7, Section 1399.273, and optician disciplinary guidelines incorporated by reference. As a reminder for the board, this was on the agenda for the February 14th meeting, but as I stated at that time, we needed to do a little bit more work. We had some significant amendments and edits to the package that had been originally adopted by the board all the way back in August of 2020. In the intervening time since then, we have made even more significant edits to the proposed text and the disciplinary guidelines incorporated by reference in this package. We have engaged in this work following examples that other programs in the department have recently engaged on that were successful. These programs were Veterinary Medical Board, Dental Board, and the Board of Vocational Nursing and Psychiatric Technicians. But in doing so, we applied the disciplinary guidelines in the text specific to opticianry. The reason why we engaged in that effort is disciplinary guidelines are a bit unique compared to a lot of other regulations that the board may engage on. Disciplinary guidelines involve one of the most serious roles that a board member will play, and the board plays collectively, which is making decisions on discipline imposed to licensees. Over time, case law and other precedents develop and disciplinary guidelines change. That's a very different process than other regulations that might go through when we're taking action on continuing education regulations, for example. Usually we're not looking at what other programs are doing or case law or things of that nature. So in the intervening period since the board last approved these regulations in August of 2020, and I think we only had one board member on our board today who was there then, a lot has changed in the landscape of disciplinary guidelines. And again, what we did was look toward the successful examples of sister boards and take those good ideas and apply them within the opticianry context. A couple of those changes you'll see in the memo. We've tried to break them out in sections. The regulatory text itself has significantly changed from what was included in the February packet and what the board prior approved in August of 2020. It's been significantly strengthened by and now including language that would require revocation whenever a licensee commits a sex offense or engages in sexual contact with the patient, client, or customer. We've also removed forms from the text that were going to be incorporated by reference. And that's a significant change that we made within the disciplinary guidelines themselves, is to remove the required forms. The main reason why we are proposing to do that is if you incorporate a form in regulation, anytime you want to make a change to it, you got to go back to regulation to make that change. Instead of having to engage in that process, we felt it would make more sense to specify the elements of the report in the disciplinary guidelines. By being specific in that way, it's clear what must be reported, but we don't lock ourselves into a specific format or template or form that has to be used. That would not prevent us from creating an example that the respondent could use, but of course we wouldn't be able to require it because it's not incorporated in the regulation. So that's another significant change that was made, was removing the two forms. One was a notice to employer form and a quarterly report of compliance form. We also revised, removed two terms because they were duplicity. They had duplicity. One of them was already mentioned in later on in the disciplinary guidelines for substance abusing licensees. So we removed two terms, worksite monitor and medical treatment terms, and we added a new term, major and minor violations. All of these terms are contained within the disciplinary guidelines themselves. And we also replaced, regarding term 33 having to do with a testing requirement, we replaced administer with require before the word examination, because for opticianry individuals, the board does not actually administer any exams. It's different than the optometrists, who we do administer the California law and regulations exam. So those are a few of the more substantive changes. There is one item within the disciplinary guidelines that staff is still working on. It's toward the back of the disciplinary guidelines. There is a section within the disciplinary guidelines that's titled recommended discipline based on the violation. And this section serves the purpose of helping to, again, inform the board, administrative law judges, and others about what the recommended discipline should be based on the violation. And the information in that section only contains a handful of such examples. And staff would like to continue performing research in that area to develop a more robust framework or set of recommendations for discipline depending on the violation. So what we're asking today is for the board to approve the text and the disciplinary guidelines. We're not exactly ready to begin the formal rulemaking with an initial statement of reasons and a 45-day public comment period, because again, we still need to finalize that recommended discipline based on violation piece. But again, what staff is asking for is approval of the text, approval of the disciplinary guidelines today. We believe that with such approvals, we would have enough time between now and July to complete all of the research for those recommended discipline. And then we'll come back at that time with the formal rulemaking package, look for board approval, and go from there. So that's what my hope and my plan for this item for today is. I recognize this is a substantial document. The text itself is about one page, but the disciplinary guidelines are substantial. So want to open it up now for board discussion, comments, questions, concerns, et cetera, about the text, the disciplinary guidelines, or staff's proposal in terms of moving forward. Member Kleppa.
Hi, just a couple things. Page 11 of the text, section 3, submission of quarterly reports. My question would be whether the information required by the quarterly report would include a statement of whether the individual has violated any laws. For instance, there is a requirement to obey all laws. There's a requirement to submit a quarterly report. what I couldn't find, and maybe I just missed it, was some affirmative statement by the individual that they are in fact in compliance with all laws. So if it's not part of the quarterly reports, we may want to modify that section to require it.
Yeah, it's a good suggestion. Thank you.
And then the second thing is section 8, page 13, cost recovery. We had an in-depth discussion earlier today on
Yeah.
cost recovery. Is that still something we want to have here if we're not going to in fact seek to recover the cost?
Okay, so let me clarify. The discussion we were having earlier with cost recovery was in the context of citations, which are not formal discipline. This is formal discipline.
So it is acceptable under all
Totally.
circumstances. Okay, and that becomes part of the recoverable total fine and what have you that's imposed on the individual, correct?
A cost recovery, I don't think is appropriate to consider as a fine.
Okay.
It's recouping the cost of the investigation that led to the formal discipline. So the formal discipline is, in this context within disciplinary guidelines, is either going to be probation or revocation,
I see.
most likely. But what led to that decision that the board made was about a lot of investigatory work, right? And that has costs that we paid for. Now that formal discipline has been imposed as part of that order, cost recovery will be included.
All right.
That's why you see in the disciplinary guidelines, the amount is left blank, because the administrative law judge, in writing the proposed decision, will fill that out based off of the cost declaration that we provide, sort of evidencing or proving those costs.
All right. Well, the only reason I bring it up is we had this discussion about essentially secret costs. Cost recovery is not something that's necessarily expected by an individual, and I understand that a suspension or revocation would be a more common level of discipline imposed rather than some sort of fine. So, but it is your position then that cost recovery in this area is more of an understandable and expected item to impose on a licensee than it would be for other types of matters, right?
I can jump in here. So Member Klappa, there's a couple important distinctions to understand with this is, so in formal disciplinary cases, there is case law permitting cost recovery, and I can provide you some more background about that in a little bit. Whereas citations are considered less formal, non-disciplinary, it's more of a corrective measure. It's a fine distinction, but it's an important distinction. So there have been case laws supporting cost recovery efforts within formal disciplinary proceedings. And so the board does have authority to seek that.
I'll use the microphone even though you're only like 6 inches from me. So I guess my question is, in this circumstance, when it's formal discipline, is cost recovery mandated?
No.
Okay, so it is still the board's choice or the executive director's choice whether to impose this or not?
Yes.
All right, so all the same concerns that we discussed would still apply, even though in this circumstance, it is more of an expected outcome than in the other circumstance, right?
Yes, that's how I understand it. Greg, do you have any other additional thoughts there?
Maybe one, if I can thread it, which is when we seek formal discipline, we're not fining somebody. That's different than in the citation context where a fine is put on place, right? In formal discipline, we're seeking to restrict the license in some way, revoke it, suspend it, put it on probation. That's done in lieu of fining because that's a more serious action. A fine with a citation would be more appropriate for lesser violations of the act. So again, cost recovery in the context of formal discipline exists just to recoup the investigatory costs that led to the formal discipline.
That's a good clarification.
All right, then from my understanding, would cost recovery be taken into account by the executive director in imposing some level of discipline? In other words, instead of an extended suspension, might be a lesser suspension given the amount of cost that will also be imposed? Is that the type of reasoning that goes on here?
No.
Because I still have a concern about essentially a secret fine, which is additional costs that come up through the investigative process that someone could not necessarily anticipate paying as a result of whatever wrongdoing they undertake. So that same concern that we had in the other context would still apply here. So, we need to kind of chew on this a little bit, I think, as to whether cost recovery is still something we want to seek in this circumstance.
We absolutely want to seek it. We have to issue a cost declaration. So we have to prove and justify the costs that we are seeking to recover. And an administrative law judge has to consent to that. So it's not secret. It's reviewed and approved, and it doesn't end there. The licensee always maintains the right to file, I think it's a writ of mandate in Superior Court and challenge that action, which is the formal discipline. So I don't think it's secret. It has to be, again, we have to prove it, we have to justify it, we have to submit what's called a cost declaration, proving and justifying those costs and their review. And I think, as counsel said, this is all done pursuant to statute and case law. So maybe we should follow up on that aspect of it. But we should be seeking cost recovery in every situation that we are taking formal discipline.
I will also add too that the board itself has the ability for proposed decisions to reduce and mitigate the penalties imposed. So hypothetically, the board sees a very high cost recovery that feels is not warranted in that situation, the board can also come back and reduce that as a part of its approval process.
Just to clarify, when I meant secret, I didn't mean that some star chamber would impose it and it would just fall on them from above. I meant that it's not something that is necessarily clearly spelled out as to a licensee as a consequence of wrongdoing, like a fine would be.
In the accusation that's filed, it is there is a section in the accusation that gets filed before the decision is made that indicates to the party accused that cost recovery may be imposed. So they are knowledgeable about it from the moment they are served with an accusation.
Right, on the way into the process, which is disciplining them for wrongdoing that occurred in the past.
Correct.
Right. So again, that was my only concern. When you have a fine, regulatory or statutory, it's always in the books as the maximum amount you could pay as a result of wrongdoing. When you have a cost recovery section like this, the monetary amount is not front and center for any licensee to understand what they're facing. This is a number that is determined as a result of the investigation that occurs in relation to their wrongdoing. So they don't know if they're facing a $5,000, $10,000, or $20,000 obligation in addition to a suspension or discharge. That's my concern.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. It's a fair concern. A license is a privilege, not a right. And part of what comes with it are the consequences. And our job is always to protect the consumer and not the licensee, right? That's our paramount mission, is consumer protection. And if in carrying out that mission and issuing formal discipline, a licensee has cost recovery of 10, 20, 30, or some high amount, well, we have to evidence and prove those costs. And a judge is going to have to determine whether to impose it. And then, as counsel stated, the board can always amend that as well. But sometimes that's what the cost of protecting consumers is. And there have been, not just at this board, but at other boards, cost recovery amounts that probably would give some of us sticker shock. But I think that's part of this landscape of consumer protection. And again, it all has to be cost declared and proven and have evidence. And so there are times where, we don't get the cost that we may ask for.
Cost recovery is not unique to our board.
No.
Member Dawson, also at the time of the ending of the disciplinary process, the person undergoing it is informed that there will be cost recovery at that time. And if they agree to the terms of probation or whatever the discipline is, they are also agreeing to that. So at that time, if they object or if they decide to take a different route, they do have that option. But if they do decide to go along with the disciplinary action that's been imposed upon them, they do agree to the cost that will be imposed. Yeah, they do agree to that. And while I'm here, I think it looks good. He mentioned, Member Klepper mentioned whether or not they asked. It says that the form's been removed. It says revised, but then removed. But the quarterly reporting form literally does ask if you've committed any offenses during this period. It's literally one of the questions, unless that was one of the revisions.
Well, you're referring to the
quarter-
optometry quarterly report, which
No, the
so because we have no disciplinary guidelines in effect for opticianry, when we are seeking discipline on an optician applicant or licensee right now, we borrow and use some of the guidelines that exist on the optometry side to help the process. And on the optometry side, we have disciplinary guidelines. They've been in effect since 2012, I think. And there is a form, a quarterly form that exists there. When the board originally approved the optician text and disciplinary guidelines in August of 2020, it was largely borrowing and looking at what already existed in the optometry side because we had those in effect since 2012. So that was the design and the intention at that time. We are removing the form here.
I see.
But not removing the elements. What I will do, and I've made this note here, is just to double check and make sure that the elements include essentially a yes/no statement as to whether you violate any state, local, or federal laws. I know that is a requirement elsewhere in the disciplinary guidelines that you comply with all rules and laws. But I do agree it would be important to have that statement on the information that is reported. So we'll make sure that it is still there. But the report that you're referring to comes from that optometry side.
So do we have a independent new form? Because again, it does say revised and then it says removed right under. And it says, so just the language, the paragraphs are the language that's going to be used?
Well, the intent here is to remove the forms. I don't want to propose forms in regulation because then you're locked into the changes issue. I may have a typo and said revised instead of removed. The text, the modified text before you all today has no form requirement. It removes the form.
Okay, it's good then. It's going to make it easier for the licensee to follow. I think it's good.
Thank you, Member Dawson.
Can I ask one more question?
Of course.
You have an alcohol and drug treatment section as an optional condition of probation. That's pages 16 and 17. Do you have drug testing or just treatment?
If you're a substance abusing licensee and that's been determined pursuant to this process, there is drug testing requirements.
I just didn't see drug testing. That's why I asked.
If you look at page 28 of the packet, conditions applying the uniform standards for substance abusing licensees. Terms 32 and 33, abstention from use of controlled substances, alcohol, and 33 is biological fluid testing. These are standard terms and conditions pursuant to the March 2019 substance abuse, I'm going to call it a council. I can't remember the full name at the moment. In March of 2019, the Substance Abuse Council revised its standards, and we incorporate by reference that March 2019 document as well. So yeah, if you're found to be a substance abusing licensee, there is biological fluid testing. And in fact, we have probationers. We'll obviously have a probation program now, and we may have a probationer or two that's subject to that at the moment. Other questions or yeah.
I have a few. First one's kind of related, kind of 6 and 7 together. So first, the changes in employment or residence. It differs from the optometry because in the optometry, it states that it includes, but not limited to, applying for employment. And that section is not here in the optician. So I don't know if there's future thought of removing that from the optician or optometry guidelines, or if the reason for the difference between the two. And with that being said, if optometrists are required to notify the probation monitor that they're applying for a new job, would it be fair to also require them to inform the potential employer about their probationary status? I mean, I know the employer, the onus is on them to do their proper research, but I feel like it says something if the applicants can forthcoming about their probationary status. So it just, those two kind of go hand in hand, that we require the probationer to inform with the application, but something as far as a notice to employer that maybe a future employer for a position they're applying for. Sort of two.
We can certainly take that back and look at it. I would probably want to caution the board, notwithstanding the fact that we have optometry guidelines that are in effect. They're from 2012. And much like we had to do with this package and rewrite it all to account for everything that's changed since it was first approved 5 years ago, those optometry guidelines, again, effective since 2012, were revised by the board in 2019. We have also not implemented that regulation. What was approved by the board in 2019 is going to have to be completely scrapped and redone, just like we had to do here. So I would kind of want to caution us to look at, to not just assume that what's in that optometry one is relevant for what's in here, or that it'll stay when we get to that package, if that makes sense. But I think if I'm understanding what you're saying with these two issues, it's that you see a notice to employer now, but what happens if you change your employer? Are you asking if there's still a requirement that you notice that new employer?
It definitely says for the new employer, you have to inform them, but I'm thinking about if you're applying for a job, that they should notify that potential employer.
Mm.
If it were similar, that they have to notify the board that they're actually applying for a new position, which isn't in this one, but it was in the optometry, and whether or not we want to keep that in or not. So something to consider about that.
Yeah, I see your point. It's something, yeah, for the board to consider. You guys we can decide that now or come back in July as well. I want to take a look at that optometry language, I think, too. Yeah.
Any more comments? You had a couple more?
A few others, I thought, yeah.
But do we want to just go in the order?
You take it wherever you want.
Okay. Well, the last one I had was, well, actually, one of them was about number 30, taking the ABO seal exam. Would there be something we could add a law exam for opticianry? And even though I know we probably don't have one at this point, if we at least had it in the guidelines, future development of a law exam, because, I mean, they are subject to the rules and regulations, and if something's been violated, I think it's reasonable to have a exam about the rules and regulations, their profession.
It's a good idea. As you just said, there is no such law and regs exam. There is certainly not one that we have any control or authority over. There's no legislative or other regulatory language that requires any optician to take any class or exam like that. I don't know if that means that we couldn't put that in here now. Something for the board, I suppose, to think about and look into. But it may be just problematic that the fact that there isn't one that exists. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it would be something that would have to be discussed in a further regulatory process, put it in regs. I don't know if there's anything in statute that you could rely on. So just something we'd have to look into.
Yeah, I mean, the only exam requirement that they have is this exam requirement in statute. So, you know, the next item is 31, which talks about professional education, and we do have the ability to, maybe that's the area where, you know, coursework, that's what 31 is about, right? We can order coursework, board-approved coursework related to the violations. And maybe that's where that comes in, right? Ethics, for example, or something like that. But I'm not aware of any exam that presently exists for that. Remember, Bragg, did you have any other items?
I did for, it's actually number 39.
Do I have a number that goes that high? No, I don't. 37?
It was the, it's the reporting, the worksite monitor.
Worksite monitor under uniform standards is 37.
Sorry.
You're good.
About the substance abuse. Any suspected substance abuse must verbally be reported to the board and the licensee's employer within 1 business days of occurrence. And if occurrence is not in the board's normal business hours, should it be the occurrence that's not during the board's business hours, or that reporting window of the 1 day?
Yeah.
And then
Probably
further,
wouldn't.
it says board's normal business hours, the verbal report, the next business day. Is this the board's next business day or the worksite monitor's next business day? So just the language just seemed a little bit. And then I just was curious as far as the verbal requirement, would leaving a voicemail to the board be adequate? And
Council, Liz, do you have any thoughts? We can wordsmith it.
Yeah. Maybe remember, Bragg, maybe do you want to maybe email some of these questions to Executive Officer Pruden, and we can look into them more deeply? Sure. I feel like that might be an effective way to go forward.
Yeah, and that's really helpful. These are really good questions. And, you know, part of the guidelines are why we brought them to the board today is we really wanted to get feedback and get some input from everybody to make sure that they're clear and easy to follow. So if you have those specific questions, yeah, we can kind of dig deeper into them, and then we come back in July, we'll have a more complete picture.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? Any comments from anyone in the audience? Any comments from anyone on WebEx?
This is the moderator for members of the public on WebEx. If you would like to make a comment on this item, you can click the raise hand icon or press *3 on your device if you are audio only. And it looks like we have a request from Ruby Garcia. Ruby, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is definitely something that we were working on. And I agree with under page 16, if you would consider the exam, because we are talking about implementing an exam. And if there was a possibility of something being said about that's under optional disciplinary things that they can work on under page 16, that aside from the ABO and NCLE, that there could be a statement saying any national exam or any exam that we would implement. And then my other comment is on professional education. I'm assuming that would consider a disciplinary action where they can take a CE. That's my only comment.
Thank you, Ruby.
All right, this is the moderator. It appears there are no further requests for public comment at this time.
Thank you, moderator. You, Pruden, did you have anything more on that item?
No, I think we've got to do a little bit more work on it. And as I already mentioned, I know there's a section at the back where we need to put together a kind of more of a chart and a table that will assist the board and judges, et cetera, with determining what the appropriate violation is depending on or appropriate discipline depending on the violation. And we'll work with Member Bragg and any other members that got ideas or comments or questions on this. This package has taken a unique road to get here. Former President Wong could probably tell us all the meetings that they had, work groups and committees over 3 or 4 years. I think it was the DOC actually spent a lot of time engaged on the package that ultimately was approved in August of 2020. So with so much time that had gone on since that original approval, with all of the changes that I've already discussed, it kind of in a weird spot, right? Because all the work group committee process already happened and now everything's kind of changed. We know we need to move forward. We got to get something in effect, not just but because it's important for the program. So just taking a weird process on this one with all of the changes and not having a subcommittee or a work group process. So I appreciate everybody weighing in on it today, continuing to look at it. It's a much better package than what I think we had in February and what we had even before that. So it'll keep getting better. We'll come back in July with a more robust package and look forward to board approval at that time, I think.
Can I ask a general question?
You certainly
Just
may.
kind of a random one. Because opticians are not required to be licensed, if some type of discipline was found to be overly burdensome and onerous and costly, what is to stop someone from just surrendering their license and continuing to work as an optician?
I think so. Your first part of your comment was in the opticians are not required to be registered. That's in the context of when they're working directly under an ophthalmologist or an optometrist. Anybody working directly under an optometrist or an ophthalmologist is not required to be licensed to do the activities that are in 2544. For example, as an unlicensed assistant. An optometrist can also fit, adjust, and dispense products. So any optician working under that license may also enjoy an exemption. As I think Member Dawson stated, right, you consent to probation during this process, and it has happened where people make the choice to be a probationer and then realize shortly thereafter that it might just make more sense to surrender. That might be because of a lot of reasons. There is nothing stopping that person from going to work for under a licensee.
I think there are some instances where, depending on where the opticians are working, some of them actually are required. In order to promote, they actually have to be licensed. So if you're going to give it up, then you've just now chosen, I think, a slightly different career path. So that's sort of on the optician as well.
Remember, Lyndon, the same issue would exist for an optometrist that got disciplined and then decided to just surrender their license. Now they're an unlicensed person. They just go work under a licensee and can do, again, a lot of activities under that process. So.
You putting anything else on that?
No, if there's no other comments or questions, I don't think we need to entertain a motion on this. We'll keep working on it. I look forward to any comments that members have on this package. Please let us know, and we'll bring it back in July.
All right, thank you. Item number 11, future agenda items. Are there any items that board members would like to put out for future? Yes.
Again, I'm not sure if this is the right place for this, but I'm always hopeful that we'll have a meeting down in Southern California. So anything we can do to move that forward,
Yeah.
I'd appreciate.
We're still hoping and planning to do it this year. I can't give you, it's not locked in yet, but we're working on it. We are endeavoring to make it happen. We've been very busy the last few months.
Anything else from the board? Future agenda items, seeing none. From the audience? Seeing none. From WebEx?
This is the moderator for members of the public on WebEx. If you would like to make a public comment on this item, please click the raise hand icon or use *3 on your device if you are audio only. And we do have requests from Ruby Garcia. Ruby, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak and a 30-second warning. Please click the unmute me button when the prompt appears on your device.
Thank you, and bear with me because and I'll do this really quickly. I have just 4 points. I would like the board to implement a possible discussion about implementing a new state exam for licensed opticians because we're looking at it being more relevant, and we can then also think about a law exam for them too. My second request is possible discussion where the board would communicate to the optical stakeholders and employers the difference between dispensing a contact lens fitter compared to a person who is just dispensing boxes of contacts. Do they need to be licensed to do that? My third is possible discussion about the technicians and assistants becoming licensed. We have seen an increase of enrollment of optometric assistants from private practices and technicians from ophthalmologists taking our programs. They are passing the national exams, but they are concerned about the licensing fees being very high. And my last point is possible consideration of implementing a state exam for optometrists. We do have some optometrists who want to write an exam for optometrists. Thank you.
All right, this is the moderator. It appears there are no further requests for public comment at this time.
Okay, thank you, moderator. At this time, that brings us to the end of our planned agenda. We do have a closed session item. So we're going to take a short break and then reconvene at 2:40. 2:40, we'll be back in for closed session.
Also to clarify, I think we're going to adjourn straight from closed session.
Yeah, we're going to adjourn and then we'll come reconvene at 2:40.
Sorry, you want to clarify that, Council?
Yeah. So we are not adjourning now. We're taking a quick break, going into closed session,
Okay.
but we won't be coming back into open.
We will not be coming back
into
Yeah.
open section after
Closed session, then no, yeah, we will not return back into open session. Yeah, thank you.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank
2:40.
you. 2:40.